Cheryl is not here yet. Ah, she just came in. Okay.
Yeah, that was crazy yesterday.
Yes.
What happened, Tyler?
What happened was I'm doing some changes to my electrical system, and I had made some changes like an hour before the room opened, and then things shut down. While like 5 minutes after the room opened, things started coming undone over here. So I had to go into emergency mode, but I got it all sorted out. Yeah. So
Awesome.
Did you just say you have no electricity yesterday?
Yesterday, no, I had backup electricity, but
Okay.
it almost ran out while we were
Okay.
working on that. So what do we got here? We've got the big news headlines that we're going to jump into. We've got the tweets that we're going to get into. And then we've got a whole bunch of smart people on stage in the Clubhouse and some more fantastic friends over here in the Twitter space. And let's see if anyone wants to jump on the mic and share their favorite headline since we met last time, which was exactly 24 hours ago.
Tyler.
Me.
Tyler.
Oh,
Tyler,
sorry.
Tyler. Warren Buffett.
I knew you were going to love it.
Oh my God. Warren Buffett in Bitcoin. And he dumped MasterCard Visa. Oh my God. Game changing. Game changing.
That is game changing. And so what Mame is referring to is there's a Brazilian neobank, which I believe is called Nubank, Nubank,
Correct.
which is also backed by Sequoia Capital, which is also Sebastian from Klarna, the founder of Klarna, is good friends with the CEO of Nubank. Nubank is hot. It's super hot. It's a neobank for Brazil, basically, right? Or for Latin America, but based out of Brazil.
Correct.
Now, Warren Buffett investing in a neobank, and is he investing $1 billion or something like that?
It was a lot. It was a lot. Ken's in the audience. We got to get Ken up.
Yeah.
Where's Ken? Ken's in the audience.
I think it's $1 billion. And now, they're part of what Nubank does is Bitcoin, but it's a neobank. It's not a traditional bank. It's this whole new space of what do we call it, DeFi, or And anyway, to see Warren Buffett, who traditionally is not a big fan of tech, honestly.
Oh my God, he hated Bitcoin. He hated it.
He's particularly negative on cryptocurrencies of all kinds, and he's expressively negative about Bitcoin. And his partner, Charlie Munger, is perhaps the world's most outspoken critic of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. He thinks of it as worse than bad, and has said so very publicly at their annual meeting that they have. And I've seen that video where he rants like an angry, impassioned rant against it. Now, investing in a neobank that, has one foot in Bitcoin, it's different than investing directly in Bitcoin, but it's, I think if we asked Warren Buffett, who's, historically, arguably one of the world's best investors.
The Oracle of Omaha.
The Oracle of Omaha, exactly, as he's known to be. I think he would say, and no doubt he's going to be asked very soon in the next few hours, and for sure, hey, what has your stance changed on Bitcoin? Somebody's going to ask him that as a result of this news this headline that Ame is sharing. I'm willing to bet that he's going to say, yeah, well, the main focus of this investment is in the company, because that's very what he would say anyways. He's going to say, I pick companies, I invest in companies. The companies I invest in dabble in many different things. And, one of those things might be Bitcoin. It's not a direct endorsement of Bitcoin. Obviously, if it was, then he would directly invest in Bitcoin. He's one of the world's most savvy investors. If he wanted to invest directly in Bitcoin, he would. But this Nubank, Nubank, as a business is booming. And as part of that is Bitcoin and crypto and all of that. And it's a unique move for Warren Buffett to make regardless. So I mean, it's kind of cool. And simultaneously, as May said very briefly, almost as interestingly, maybe even more interestingly, is him backing away from Visa and MasterCard. And
Exactly.
right,
Where's Aaron? Where's Aaron?
yeah,
We got to get
exactly.
Aaron in here. Where's Aaron?
Good call, May. Where is Aaron? Aaron used to work at MasterCard. And as we in this room have known for a while, and the rest of the world is starting to figure out, these traditional gatekeepers of payments, aka Visa and MasterCard, they're kind of fucked right now. If you look at the bigger picture of how the global financial landscape is evolving rather rapidly at the moment, there's a notable it's not clear who the biggest winners are yet in this global new era of fintech, right? So the neobanks are looking pretty good, like Nubank. But more obvious than who the winners will be is who the losers are likely to be. And the losers are likely to be Visa and MasterCard unless they start acquiring a lot of the companies that might replace them. And to their credit, they kind of are trying. They're at least trying to do that. Let's be reasonable.
Well, Tyler, they're trying, but the reality of it is, it's a bit like maybe there is also a change of guards as we progress into this new way of working. Right. That in some ways, maybe some things need to drop off.
Right now,
the new generation come forward.
I've got some personal intel to drop on this because as a large tech conference producer, organizer, host that I am, Visa and MasterCard compete with each other to be the sponsors of my event every year and have for many years. So I've met with both of them many times over the years. And that conversation has evolved over the years. And the kind of state of the union of that conversation, the gestalt of that conversation, is that they want entrepreneurs to know, particularly fintech entrepreneurs and developers, we are here to be your friend and to partner with you. We are not your enemy. Come talk to us. We'd like to partner with you. We might even acquire you.
Well, not with those high APYs.
Right. Well, no. I'm separately. What they want to do is, I mean, the word bear hug comes to mind, but like they want to
absolutely.
They want to get all up in and be cozy with the fintech companies, and like Plaid, who they did try. They did make every effort to acquire Plaid, and the government said, no, that would be too powerful. You as Visa acquiring that fintech in particular would give you too much power. So they had to walk that one back. And that was like a $5 billion acquisition, by the way. So kudos to Visa for trying to make acquisitions like that. They said that would have been a genius acquisition. It's so genius that the government said you can't do it because that would give you too much power. And in the short term, it might. They're in a tricky spot because they know they need to acquire the innovation and bring it in-house. It's to stay relevant for the new evolving landscape and era that we now are on the threshold of. And yet the regulators are saying, no, you can't acquire that. It's like, oh man, what a sticky situation to be in. That's got to be painful when you are trying to get, a life raft or a lifeboat, and the what's the agency who monitors the oceans? The Naval Patrol comes by and says, no, you can't use that life raft. It's like, say what? I'm willing to pay good money for this life raft. So that great share by May. That
Tyler,
probably
these will be very interesting interoperable shares for sure, because there's going to be a tsunami or a little bit of a snowball. And let's all be realistic, having a little bit of fun with it. It was probably he was watching Snoop Dogg during the Super Bowl and saw that bouncing Coinbase QR code and just was like, let's go. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, the reality is that it seems like everyone's now, I think after the Super Bowl, now we're seeing that there's more adoption starting to come through.
You know what?
Also, there's an argument on the table. There's also a little bit of some grumbling that's been going on about what is actually happening in El Salvador. Because the reality is the 1.5 billion that the IMF used to lend El Salvador Their bond that's going to release in 1 month from today, the Bitcoin bond, is going to have 1 billion. And they're saying that they're oversubscribed by 500 million already for people that want to be part of that Bitcoin bond in El Salvador. If you look at the total of that number that IMF lent them, they actually could possibly get that total amount of money by the sale of that bond on March 15th of this year, between March 15th and March 20th. So I'm really quite curious to see how the bigger players start to really see the power of Bitcoin and the transformation of the space, and start to recognize that as you create new rails to support old rails that might be falling apart, you definitely have to start bringing more people in that are formidable people like Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. The fact that he's just done this, irregardless if he did it directly or indirectly, it's going to send a message and a little bit of a little shockwave through that whole space for those people that have been naysaying this whole time. And I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the regulation as a result of this.
So our friend Cal Patel is listening to the live streams, as he's been known to do. Howdy, Cal, and he's DMing me as we speak, and he says he sent an article about Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway plowed about 250 million, and one of the quotes in the article is, quote, Munger, which is, I told you, Warren Buffett's right-hand guy, his partner, Charlie Munger, has repeatedly praised Sequoia's ability to find and back future world beaters. And that's what Nubank is. They're backed by Sequoia. And then Cal separately says the current investment is an extension of the original deal, and the 1 + 1 = 55 is a little bit of a pump. And Sequoia, by the way, happens to be my special guest for my next monthly event in Stockholm, Sweden. You're the first to hear that on March 23rd. So I will try and live stream that here in Tech News Around the World. And I'm looking forward to that because Sequoia is, one of the best venture capital firms in the world, easily. So I've been looking forward to that for a long time. And it's my 10th year anniversary of doing that monthly event in Stockholm. So it's a nice that it worked out that way. And back to another really interesting point that Amay just made. That isn't it interesting that over the weekend, was it, or just was it on Sunday, the Super Bowl, I believe people will look back at that Super Bowl as a pivotal moment in fintech, for lack of a better word, and in the future of finance, for lack of a better word, in the evolution of the financial landscape. Because the event was held at SoFi Stadium, which itself is a fintech company, a financial startup, and notably, the best commercials almost unanimously were Coinbase, and there was a lot of other crypto activity in these Super Bowl commercials. And it's almost like the official moment where the whole space went mainstream and all that. And we might look back at that Super Bowl as a sort of pivotal moment, either positively or negative. For that, we could still debate, what the signs for now are pointing positively. Similar to this follow-up headline that Amay is sharing about Charlie and Warren investing in this neobank called Nubank. So it's
Tyler,
yes, Ken, go ahead.
can I just maybe give a little bit more of a nuanced view of what's going on with this stuff, as opposed to the rah-rah
I guess if we
crowd?
have to do the whole nuance thing, if that's what we're going to...
Yeah, the nuance for
This is
Nubank.
why Ken's on stage. This is why we love Ken.
So you mentioned SoFi, which is a company that I like, as I told you, because mostly because of who the CEO is. But I mean, Anthony Noto just said not that long ago. I mean, they've got some position actually long some of the cryptos, right? But he was saying, it should be like a small part of your portfolio, but that's, more like a gold thing. I mean, he's still, so even he's using caution. Okay, Fidelity's in crypto. Even JP Morgan's offering crypto to clients, even though Jamie Dimon says it's worth zero. Well, Bitcoin, that's what he said. Bitcoin's worth zero, but he'll custodian it for you, or get it for you. So distinguish between those people who have realized there's a market, and figure how to inject themselves as the middleman, where they can either make money custodying the stuff or trading the stuff, as opposed to the people who who actually believe in the stuff. Like MicroStrategy, that guy actually believes in it. He's long a ton of it on his balance sheet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very different than these other things. So, and I don't really know a lot about new banks. So I'm gonna be very reserved in what I'm saying until Buffett made this investment. I didn't even know what it was, so I don't know what their balance sheet looks like. But if it's a more typical fintech, if it's a fintech like SoFi, what they're really doing is saying there are going to be new banks, okay? Ones that are not tied to brick and mortar. I mean, people have been predicting the demise of brick and mortar for 30 years. So maybe we're finally there, okay? It's kind of like predicting the demise of Blockbuster. Everybody knew that we were going to go to video streaming, but it took a while until we got rid of the last Blockbuster store, and actually there's still one left somewhere in Oregon or Alaska. Okay, there's one. Okay, so maybe this is more about kind of disintermediation of traditional bricks and mortar banks, okay, than it is about crypto. Okay, crypto is just an aspect of it. So I would just you know, just people should just know the difference between some of the fintechs and then someone going long, literally long crypto, which is what MicroStrategy did.
Right.
And by the way, Tyler, the firm's not doing that well. If you haven't looked at the stock price recently, the so-called great disintermediator, right? You know, I mean, in fact, of the last 52 weeks, Visa's probably done better than a firm. So,
Yeah.
um, so I just people. I'm always concerned because I've been through the bubbles before. People get overhyped about things. Okay,
Yep.
this is where it is. I
Yep.
mean, so
So,
more often than not. So anyway, I just you always use a bit of caution. That's all. Bye.
well, by the way, you made a point that I think is worth re- reminding everybody of, is that the way tech has always worked, and very notably when the internet was starting out, people got crazy, frothy, excited. Geeks get overly ambitious. That's the nature of geeks. And we get crazy, frothy, excited. And there was a big internet hype of that everything was going to become, you know, actually, the original NASDAQ 99, 98, 99 big tech bubble. And then it came crashing down because uh, expectations got ahead of things, and reality didn't catch up, and then that reality distortion field bubble popped, and many people laughed and said, ha 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 ha, that you were living in a fantasy land. However, we are today living in that fantasy land that bubble of 99 was excited about. It's now here. It's now a reality. The problem is that the geeks get so excited that they can't wait, and the rest of the world can't catch up with them fast enough. And it takes time. It takes decades when we want it to happen now, 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 now. And we're seeing that exact similar cultural dynamic play out with VR and other crazy technologies like crypto generally. It feels rather similar, honestly. And VR feels rather similar to that same dynamic of wild exuberance of opportunity, and then we can't quite make it all work for grandpa and grandma just yet, and that's going to take a bunch of years to make it all work, make crypto Bitcoin work for grandma and grandpa, but it will.
And,
And 10 years from
and
now
by the
it
way,
will. Yeah.
when the internet bubble was going on, those of us that were sober, okay,
Mhm.
said, remember when automobiles got started? Automobiles, absolutely, we know, because at that point we were looking at hindsight, were a transformative technology. But most of the automobile companies that were created in the early days of automobiles actually went bust. So what you're going to have is probably, particularly if we don't change our antitrust laws, there'll be a few winners, and there'll be a lot of companies that don't make it. So it's not every company that's going to make it, which is why it's always important to kind of look at balance sheets and try to, see which companies can make it if the market crashes. That, because a lot of the growth companies are always relying on external financing. What happens if you can't get external financing for 9 months or a year? How are you going to do? Okay, there's a lot of stuff that people need to look at. I should point out, by the way, and this was just in the last few weeks, SoFi went out and got themselves a bank charter. So they're now regulated as a regular bank. They wanted to get a traditional bank charter, okay, because they wanted to be able to borrow with the other banks at competitive interest rates. And I think their comment was their funding costs, now that they have to comply with traditional banking regulations and they have a traditional banking license, their funding costs are going to go down 50%. So I mean, it's the same thing, quite frankly, I told you, with like Lemonade or a company like that. I mean, you could try to reformulate some of these things and take out some of the inefficiencies, look a little bit better for the younger crowd. But at the end of the day, the very basics of the business will not change. Lending has risk, you have to do underwriting. Insurance has risk, you have to do underwriting. Okay, you know, and you can talk about algorithms from today till tomorrow, but you still have underwriting risk. Okay, and so it's maybe not as different as everybody thinks it is. It's not 180 degrees different. It might be 45 degrees different. That 45 degrees might be very important in determining if someone's a disruptor and gets rid of an incumbent. But it's going to be 40. It's going to be 45 degrees of difference. It's not going to be 180 degrees of difference, because that 180 degrees of difference is a completely different business. You know,
Yeah.
and to your point of the tech bubble, we talked about Cisco yesterday making, supposedly, I mean, I don't know if they've officially announced it, a $20 billion acquisition, the largest that they've ever done. Cisco stock is first nearing now where it was like 20 years ago. I mean, Cisco was one of the kind of like a FANG stock back in 2000. It was one of the leaders of the tech internet bubble, and now when that crashed, it was down for a long time. Okay, even Qualcomm, that never really missed a beat in terms of their business. Qualcomm stock went down for a long time before it recovered, simply because of where the valuation was, not because there was anything wrong with their business. They didn't miss a beat in the business, because they have the very valuable patents with the royalties on the chips. Nonetheless, you could price something high enough that eventually people get sobriety, and it deflates, and it takes a while. Okay, so I would just tell everybody, use caution. That's a little bit different than actually, by the way, directly investing in a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or something, because that's not even an operating company. That's a whole different, ball of wax. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd actually compare it to
Okay.
being truly closer to gold. People talk about it as digital gold. It probably is. Gold is probably a closer comparison than an operating company.
Yeah.
But Warren Buffett apparently is buying an operating bank, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm done speaking.
Okay. Very well. Let's get into the top big headlines here. Although Messi, I'm sorry, Messi, you said you had one you want to share before we go into the big ones.
Oh, well, you remember. Thank you. No, one of the big African fintech flew to a wave that became a unicorn, I think in March of 2021. They just raised another 250 million, tripling their valuation from 1 billion to 3 billion. So that was a huge news for Africa that just
Yeah,
came out.
I saw that. We have that as one of. Yeah, Mabonigo.
Yes, yeah, I was actually preempting that Messi would go next, and thanks again, Tyler, for remembering Messi, because I was waiting for Ken to finish. I think he said it really well about the caution we have to exercise, but also opportunity that's happening in the fintech space. And then this is huge news. I'm in Cape Town. And I've today happens to be my day going to see various fintechs and investors, and including some that are invested in Flutterwave. And yeah, like some of the investors I met were already saying, "Wow, this is it's amazing news, but it's really, really expensive, right?" I think someone in one of the chat groups I'm in said that Flutterwave is now worth more than the GDPs of some African countries, right? And they're definitely worth more than a lot of banks in Africa. There's also nervousness around the telcos who are now becoming more like banks. As you know, mobile money and M-Pesa is big in Africa, as well as other Airtel Money, MTN Money, etc. But also banks are now thinking about becoming more differentiated, because they're also being squeezed by the fintechs, right? But yeah, when fintechs in Africa get bigger than whole GDPs of countries, and they're all struggling to also kind of generate revenue, but the excitement is so high from foreign investors coming into Africa to get more fintechs in their portfolio. There are questions being raised about, these investors are trying to think about cashing out now because they think it's really, really, really high and unsustainable. So just wanted to add that in context to Africa, as well as Ken's kind of cautionism on the fintechs.
Yeah, I think, Mbwana, I think a few rooms back we were talking if the Nigerian fintech space is really saturating, right? That's part of the seems to be a pattern. But yeah, a lot of fintechs, even today, researching for the room tonight, I saw like, I don't know, about four fintechs have raised money, not as big as Flutter Wave, but like all fintechs are really raising a ton of money.
Yes, Messi. There was a Stitch also raised in South Africa, a 21
Yeah.
million Series A, which I think Tyler had mentioned. But one thing that's for sure that I think, yeah, and Tyler, you'll definitely understand this. Talent in Africa is now getting scooped up. So obviously, some of this money for fintech is needed to get licenses as you expand. It's not cheap to expand across Africa. To build up infrastructure and get bigger in other markets and entries. So that a lot of that's, but also licenses are not cheap as well, right? But one other effect is talent, right? It's getting more and more expensive. So I heard today from a fintech entrepreneur that it used to be that the arbitrage for a Western developer, engineer, say in the UK or the US, versus a South African one was about 40% cheaper, just under half. Now it's almost level for the first time, right? So South Africa, Cape Town being this sunny place you can go in the northern winter and enjoy, and you can actually have cheap developers and build almost world-class kind of products from here with engineering talent. That gap is now narrowing. So because of all the fintech techs that are hiring and all the growth, which is positive in some respect, but it's also why these companies need to raise more money to expand the cost of talent, the cost of expansion, and also licensing.
Okay, so yeah, it's a pretty exciting developments going on over there.
That's why I think some of us are struggling to get talents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great point.
Tyler, are
Yeah,
you there?
I'm here.
Or
Where?
is that
What? There we
okay?
go. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, it's you know, I think this all makes perfect sense, and it's a great point about the talent, and it's exciting. I mean, it's India's. I potentially I would love nothing more than to see Africa follow what has been happening in India in the past couple of years, where it took a little while, and then it's almost it's all. This is why growing startup ecosystems. I often use the metaphor of like making a cake, because once you get the flour and the water and all the necessary ingredients together in the right environment with the bowl and the right spoons and an appropriate oven that can get to the right temperature, you can make magical, tasty treats all day long. And India is now doing that repeatedly. They got the system on lock, and it's fun to watch other places, particularly the whole LATAM region, as like we were just talking about with New Bank, with Warren Buffett investing in a Latin American neobank, and the continent of Africa is showing every signs of developing nicely on track. So, if you missed the boat on Europe or India, pay attention, because the same process is unfolding in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa. So here we go. It's exciting stuff. So those are big areas. I mean, Asia's, most of the planet lives in Asia, by the way. I know most people outside of Asia have a hard time understanding that, but it's like Asia is most people are Asian, by the way. So the
Yeah, sorry. I was gonna give it to you that the news when you were closing the room last night. Cyber security to Ukraine was happening last
yeah,
night as it was coming in as breaking news.
yeah, and then just Africa has so much potential. It's so incredible, and it's still super early. As exciting as it is, what's cool is all the indicators are continue to uh, point. All signs are heading in very positive directions, which is so great to see. So, the first big tech story today is from the Washington Post about Mr. somebody named Mark Zuckerberg, who outlines changes to Meta's corporate values, including "Move fast together" is the new catchphrase, and quote, "Live in the future," and some true corporate gobbledygook, metamates me. What on earth could that possibly mean? I'm not sure. Metamates me, a new set of corporate values announced today, was ridiculed by employees, according to the Washington Post, at a virtual all-hands meeting Tuesday, that was yesterday. Facebook escalated its attempts to not only rebrand itself, but also manage its demoralized and often adversarial workforce with a new set of corporate values derived from a naval slogan. CEO Mark Zuckerberg, who renamed the company Meta last year, held up a slide deck showcasing new corporate values. Employees would be expected to first prioritize Meta, followed by a person's team, which is their metamates, followed by the individual, which is me. He said the company's corporate values would be live in the future, and be direct and respect your colleagues. According to three people familiar with the meeting who spoke on the condition of anonymity to describe internal matters, it was previously be open. I have no idea what that means. Years ago, the company's slogan of "Move fast and break things" was changed to just "Move fast." On Thursday, the company announced it would now be "Move fast together." The changes to corporate values were ridiculed by some employees internally, who described them as corporate indoctrination and out of touch. Facebook did not immediately have a comment. In a tweet, Facebook Chief Technology Officer Andrew Bosworth said that the saying "metamates me" was a reference to a Naval phrase which Instagram has used for a while. The phrase used by Instagram is "shipmates self." His tweet also said that the term "metamates" was coined by the scholar Douglas Hofstadter after an employee reached out to him for ideas. The changes reflect Facebook's pursuit of a new identity after years of controversy that have demoralized its workforce. The company changed its name to Meta to help shift the focus to building hardware and a rebranding that followed revelations by a whistleblower that showed how much the company knew about its damage to society, including negatively affecting the body image of young women and allowing disinformation to spread. The town hall meeting was also streamed for the first time on Facebook's virtual reality platform, Horizon Venues. The company is attempting to demonstrate the idea that corporate meetings could be held in virtual reality, starting to use its town halls as a use test case. Facebook has long had a workplace culture that has prized openness, but as executives become more paranoid about leaks and reputational damage, paranoid? No, that is not paranoia when you are having leaks to now be worried about them. That's not paranoia. That's just being sane and rational. If someone shot your dog, protecting your other dogs is not paranoia. That's rational behavior. So they're not more paranoid about leaks. They're being very rational about the fact they're getting leaks all the time, like on an almost daily basis. And their very bizarre degree of openness is now no longer a sane behavior. That's why no other company does that. So what's interesting is how the Washington Post is trying to frame Facebook as demoralized and now paranoid and using all of this nonsense. That is not news. That is not journalism. You're not doing journalism, you're doing evangelism when you say things like that. You have no evidence of that, of them being paranoid. That's your opinion. You're not an opinion. This is not by the way, this is not listed in the opinion section of the Washington Post. It's listed as a technology article in the technology section under the journalism part of the paper. You should not be calling them paranoid unless you have an employee saying, I think my team members are paranoid. Okay, then they can say that. But you, as the publication, as a news organization, are in no position to say that unless you have any kind of evidence to point to. So this is really a slip. You're becoming a tabloid, Washington Post. Please stop doing this. This is true. That is more concerning than what's going on over at Facebook, honestly. So, sorry, and for that rant there, but I really get upset when journalists abandon the art form so flippantly. So anyway,
On that point, I think that whole concept between journalism and evangelism is a good one, because one of the things that I struggle with, I think the market struggles with, is how do you make metaverse real? And when metaverse was basically coined, from Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, like a lot of people thought it was just a PR, redirect from really what was going on with the company, including this article. And I think when you talk to companies and you try to establish use cases or brainstorm or collaborate on use cases, like they don't think it's real, right? Because they tie everything back to the missteps, the perceived missteps, the conduct, the culture at Facebook, and to Ken's earlier point, you're trying to make the hype real, and in trying to do so, they always fall back and say, "See, it's just nonsense. It's just Facebook and Zuck, and it's just part of this massive redirect PR stunt," which we know it's not, but it makes the adoption curve to new technologies, new use cases, it makes it difficult, right? Until that education, awareness, and that critical use case comes to bear.
Okay. I'm looking to see if any interesting tweets have come out about this article from the Washington Post, and I don't really see any. So the next big topic is from the New York Times. Google says it plans to bring something called the Privacy Sandbox to Android, limiting data sharing from smartphones, and promises the changes will be less disruptive than Apple's. Interesting move. As predicted, Apple is kind of hoarding data and not sharing it with Facebook most notably, but others like that. And it's no surprise that Google would take a similar approach, but at the same time taking a jab at Apple, saying we're not doing it as to the degree that Apple is. We're nicer than Apple is. We're more friendly with you. Hey, publishers, don't go crazy and start suing us like you're doing with Apple. We're going to be a little more friendly with you, as Apple is getting itself into a little bit of heat. We've read some headlines recently where in the EU and in Australia, where Germany most notably, and Axel Springer of Germany, very notably, is leading an association of publishers in Europe against Apple's new kind of privacy hoarding of data, as they would no doubt describe it. And Google's getting in a bit of hot water already, too, around their whole new cookie system. But Google, as it says here, plans to this new privacy sandbox for Android, limiting data sharing from smartphones. Hey, they're a goddamn ad net. I mean, Apple clearly has aspirations to become a stronger ad network kind of a player, but Google already is the world's biggest ad network, period. No, there's never, ever been anything even remotely close. So they already are the ad network. So them doing the data hoarding is of particular interest, because they already have the network to monetize it, and it's to the detriment of everybody else in the ecosystem, ostensibly. So anyone have an interesting take on Google's privacy sandbox? We can read the article together if you wish from the New York Times, at least the first bit of it, so we get a little more additional context. It says Google said on Wednesday that it was, oops, hold on one second. I need to open this in a new tab here. Hold on. Boom. Here we go. Okay, it says Google said on Wednesday that it was working on Oh my God, New York Times, what are you doing? I got to. Can somebody stall while I remove this paywall on this article for a second? Where do we go? Go ahead. Anybody can jump in on this. Go.
Cheryl is quiet. I think she doesn't want to take the job anymore.
Hey, Tyler,
Hello.
while you're working on that stuff, I just can't remember which one it was. It's one of two. But Justin Higgins had a journalist on his show 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm just can't remember which one it was. But this was someone because he had two of them who had both worked at some point for the big traditional media, and now they're working for some version of a new media. I think one of them was working for a Huffington Post, and another one was working for BuzzFeed. And so I'm just not sure which one it was, but one of them said on when he was on with Justin, just admitting that even though they don't have to do it because they're long enough in the tooth that that they don't find themselves at risk. They said a younger journalist today is judged by the number of clicks they get on their article. Okay, so I mean that's the reality. If you're not getting judged by winning a Pulitzer Prize, you're getting judged by the number of people who click on your article.
Good
I
point.
mean that's the world we're in, and it's all of our faults. It's a social fault that we would have to figure out some sort of if you and that was and I'm not suggesting that we should do this, but you'd have to have a government remedy on this because because the marketplace is going to do what the marketplace is going to do, okay? And you're not going to have enough self control on this at this point, you know. So I mean it is what it is.
But I think, Ken, we do need kind of the traditional journalism where they do investigative, really, really good kind of reporting, because now anyone is a reporter being on Reddit or whatever it is on the internet, which is causing all the misinformation that we all see, especially now with the COVID, right? It's because anyone can try to claim that they are a journalist and things like that. On top of that, big tech has been actually benefiting from this traditional well reporting because they are aggregating it. I mean, you Google. I used to go to Google News all the time. It is because I think it's easier to get the news, but Google doesn't do any news. They are just simply aggregating all these decent journalists do.
Yeah,
So
because
I think
Google is free, and if you want, you could there you can get a subscription from other places, but a lot of people don't want to pay for it, and then people figure out that they need multiple subscriptions. I have multiple subscriptions, but I don't have a subscription for everything. There's a publication called The Information that does a really good job at breaking stories in media and tech, and I just choose not to get it because it would be like my 30th whatever subscription, and it's not cheap. So I don't have it, so but I get the headlines. But I wish sometimes I can read the stories because sometimes they have a little bit more in-depth stories on those sectors, even though they're generally covering the same stories as the major media, maybe with a little bit more depth. But you have to be, I mean, but people have to be willing and able to pay for that. And I think there is a question for the general public, how many subscriptions can you afford to pay for? And it's not just information. People are paying for music subscriptions. They're paying for Amazon Prime subscriptions. They're paying for Netflix. I mean, all of a sudden you get up one day and you've got $300-400 a month at least, okay, in subscription costs, and a lot of people can't even afford that. So that's the problem. Okay. Anyway, so I'm
Ken.
done. Yeah.
So
I agree
MENA
with you,
started,
Ken.
they started off by saying that their performance indicator now is clicks, right? So that's a problem because if that's the case, they will end up just writing clickbait headlines. So if their performance indicator is based on the review of the article, I think that will be a better reflection of the quality of the article.
There is a solution.
Ken. First of all, I agree with you, and I have the same exact emotion around the information, which I always look at their stories, and I always think, oh, I want a subscription, but then I was like, okay, I got the meat and potatoes of the story, but it is expensive. So I agree with you on that. I think there is a way to solve it, and it's in the usual way, which is through
I'll be back
incentives.
in 2 minutes.
And can you imagine if, obviously, most of the paywalled media is obviously making its money from advertisers. And imagine if you could use a certain form of money, and in money that was issued to you by the advertisers, so that you could use that budget to read uh, to read articles. Essentially, the brands are still paying for you to get access to the articles, but you're determining where to spend that budget. So let's say you have some, whoever's the big advertiser on New York Times or whatever, and imagine that you could have that brand's money, and that you can allocate that brand's money to the New York Times in order to read a certain amount of articles. And therefore, you're keeping the integrity of the relationship between the brand and the media outlet, but you're getting to allocate that budget to stories that you're interested in, which is a much better indicator of what is truly interesting and not interesting, because that budget has a value, and it has a value to you in your wallet, and it has a value to the media outlet, or to the journalist. I think that is the modality we'll probably move into, and I'm certainly batting on that front for there to be an incentive-based voting system, so that skin in the game is always a much better determinant of the quality of information.
But so the question is, that is the consumers that you are trying to incentivize. But what I was just wondering is how the big tech is actually just being in the middle, right? They are making ads, that's fine. It's the eyeballs that they are offering, but at the same time they are also enticing people, like this is an additional content that consumers go for whether it's Google or Facebook or whatever that might be, because to see articles as well, and these articles are actually being sourced from journalists that they don't seem to be getting paid by most of them. So how do we actually get also that type of tunnels that it gets to the rabbit hole, and people are not willing to pay because they see it somewhere else being free? So how do we get the tech actually to be part of the solution?
If you if you have the incentivization, whether it's by real money or proxy money of some description, I think that one would be able to determine that, and you'd also be able to use that with other journalists that would choose to accept that form of payment. So I do think that it's possible to surface that, because the problem with the internet as it stands is that obviously identity is not attached for the most part to the likes, etc. So you don't have any read for quality, and furthermore, you have a problem with the ability to evaluate that information, because it is, as I think Matt said, it is overinflated for likes, or for clicks, maybe it was Ken. So it's about attention, not quality. But you can rectify all of that if you start to put some form of economic hurdle or skin in the game on the part of the liker and of the part of the reader. And
Did someone say
it's really
microwave?
the same. That's the micropayments approach. If every like cost you money, you would think differently about your likes, if you had a budget.
That was Cheryl who suggested that, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean the concept of 1 penny per article instead of subscriptions, as Ken was correctly kind of ranting about. If we could consume content on a penny per article basis, everybody wins. And it would solve a lot of these problems. And that's why that honestly is one of the biggest benefits. If we can switch to a scalable digital payment system, that would be one of the reasons
That's
to
right.
do it. Yeah.
that's really that's the reason why you can't use dollars to do this, is because the movement of dollars is so inefficient. So that whole layer, the reason, when people say, oh, but you're not going to, cryptocurrencies, whatever else, one has to realize that once you can, exchange value at extremely low friction with extremely high fidelity in terms of trusting the value of that, and with extremely high fungibility, that means exchangeability between assets. Once you can do that, you start to get a much clearer read and clearer provenance for those things. And it's really the same budget. You're just reallocating that budget directly to the consumer in order so that they can express their preferences, and you can redeem it in the same way. The payment is still being made to the publisher, or more accurately, what I'd like to see is payment directly to the journalist, like you're getting with Substack, like you get with Medium, like you get with real good. I think the future of journalism is maybe to be associated or affiliated or endorsed by numerous banners, shall we say, as contributors, but you have integrity as a journalist yourself that is above and beyond the marquee at the top, and that leads to less groupthink as well, I think.
It's not so different than what I do as an event organizer, where I have sponsors who pay for all the costs of putting on the event. Like journalists could take a similar approach, and I'm glad to hear you mention Substack, because that was the same word going through my head. So the next topic. Oh, by the way, I got the New York Times article open. It says Google plans privacy changes, but promises to not be disruptive. Well, yeah, because it doesn't want to spook the regulators. It says it will give other. So this is a nice little tightrope maneuver that they are dancing on, because they're trying to simultaneously excite their investors but not spook the regulators. It says it will give other companies plenty of time to adapt to changes to its Android software. Similar changes made by Apple affected big internet companies. What they mean Facebook, by the way. Google said on Wednesday that it was working on privacy measures meant to limit the sharing of data on smartphones running its Android software, but the company promises those changes would not be as disruptive as similar move by Apple last year. Apple's changes to its iOS software on iPhones asked users for permission before allowing advertisers to track them. Apple's permission controls, and ultimately the decision by users to block tracking, have had a profound impact on internet companies that build businesses on so-called targeted advertising. Google did not provide an exact timeline for its changes, but said it would support existing technologies for at least 2 more years. This month, Meta, the company founded as Facebook, said Apple's privacy changes would cost it $10 billion this year in lost advertising revenue. The revelation weighed on Meta's stock price and led to concerns about other companies reliant on digital advertising. Blah, blah, and it continues. You get the idea. So the next...
Just want to make one observation here, which I think highlights something interesting, I hope. And that is that you never see Larry and Sergey on the yachts and drawing attention, and they're so clever. They've been so adroit in managing their massive power, because by putting in Schmidt, they took attention away from themselves. People really don't know that much about the two of them, given that they control the internet pretty much at this moment, and they're 95% of their business is in advertising, right? They're just so clever. They created Alphabet before they were broken up by the regulator. So they understood how powerful Google was going to be and took themselves out of that picture. They removed themselves from the C-suite, from the leadership position. And then, they are so cleverly, being helpful of government in many ways. And they keep themselves always in the shadows. They really are, very, very smart when you compare them to the other technocracy leaders who put themselves front and center and make themselves a target. And it reminded me of, they really are masters of a move in chess that they call the Schwitzenzug, which is where you give up a position that makes you look like you've given something, but in reality, you're just strengthening your position one step down the track. And they constantly do this. And I think that one really has to admire even if it's pernicious, how smart they are.
Well, the next article is about Google's potential weaknesses. It says, granted, it's a tech blog called DKB. Google search is dying is the headline. And it says, Reddit is currently the most popular search engine. Interesting move or take. And it's this is based on a tweet by Mr. Paul Graham, who's the original big cheese behind Y Combinator, a very substantial figure in Silicon Valley. And Paul Graham's tweet said, Reddit is unique in social media. 15 years after launching, it still hasn't peaked. And it shows a really interesting chart that you can see if you click on the link at the top of the Clubhouse room. And if Cheryl, if you could please share it at the top of the Twitter space. This is a really, really interesting tweet from Paul Graham. Maybe we can find the tweet from Paul Graham and pin that to the top of the Twitter space. JT could also do that ostensibly, and Eric IO could do that as well. Any of the speakers in Twitter, if you could find the tweet from Paul Graham about Reddit, how it shows the growth charts of many popular social media.
The peak date. The peak date is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, of Facebook, which peaked in December of 2012, Twitter, which peaked in June of 2013, Snapchat peaked in September of 2015, Instagram, April of 2020, and Reddit still hasn't peaked. And the article goes on to say the only people who don't know that are the team at Reddit who can't be bothered to build a decent search interface. It says Reddit is currently the most popular search engine. So instead, we resort to using Google and appending the word Reddit to the end of our searches. Paul Graham thinks this image means Reddit as a social media site still hasn't peaked. What it actually means is that the amount of people using Reddit as a search engine is growing. And why is that so interesting? It's because Reddit is human-powered. And you could think of it as a variation of Quora, where it's people asking questions and other people giving very thoughtful, oftentimes, answers that are then ranked by the viewers, right? Quora is not that different, ostensibly. It's just Reddit has far more engagement in users. And in part,
but it's hard to know the quality because the users are you have less data on the user, the information that you're receiving, but you get much better people-powered information.
Right. Now, why is this also interesting? And it's because in Korea, and every Korean person will know that this is not so totally different from Naver, where it's a very people-powered search engine. And this is something I know very intimately because I worked with Jason Calacanis on building a people-powered search engine invested in very heavily by Sequoia and Elon Musk and a whole bunch of other incredibly smart individuals. Mark Cuban, to name a few. Anyway, the building a human-powered search engine, if you go out to do that and you raise, $20+ million from brilliant investors and try and build a human-powered search engine, you'll become intimately familiar with Naver and Yahoo Answers and this whole paradigm of trying to build a Q&A platform similar to Naver, which then Quora has been trying to do and in some ways struggling to scale. And it is true that Reddit kind of is doing it in a way that has not caught most people's attention. But if you do Google searches and add the word Reddit to the end, you're likely to get some really decent, valuable links that will help answer your question, because you'll have people who have the same question before you, and somebody in a Reddit community answered it, hundreds of people answered it, and hundreds of thousands of people ranked those hundreds of answers for you. And you get some surprisingly good, in-depth responses on nearly every topic you can think of at this point. And that's an incredibly valuable canonical database of human-powered intelligence. And but by the way, so could Clubhouse via transcriptions, by the way. So, especially if Reddit switches to social audio, which, by the way, I heard last week ago we read that headline, did we not? That Reddit was going to start doing their version of social audio. So, the article continues. Hold on one second. Why are people searching Reddit specifically? The short answer is that Google search results are clearly dying. The long answer is that most of the web has become too inauthentic to trust. How do we know Google is dying? If you've tried to search for a recipe or product review recently, I don't need to tell you that Google search results have gone to shit. You would have already noticed that the first few non-ad results are SEO optimized sites filled with affiliate links and ads. Google still gives decent results for many other categories, especially when it comes to factual information. You might think that Google results are pretty good for you and you have no idea what I'm talking about. What you don't realize is that you've been self-censoring yourself from searching most of the things that you would have wanted to search. You already know subconsciously that Google isn't going to return a good result. I'm far from the only one who thinks Google is dying, and then he links to several other people.
Just slightly. It's such a good article, but it's so slightly missing the point, which is that it's not that you're self-censoring. Is that Google is giving you the answers that it knows that it has conditioned you to want. So it's providing you answers that are in your lane, conditioned by your prior decisions. So the funny thing is that you've built this sort of glass house for yourself, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. And then the article says, why are people adding Reddit to their queries? There's a fun conspiracy theory that popped up recently called the dead internet theory. The claim is basically that most of the internet is bots. There aren't real people here anymore. This isn't true yet, but it reflects some general sense that the authentic web is gone. The SEO marketers gaming their way to the top of every Google search result might as well be robots. Everything is commercialized. Someone's always trying to sell you something. Whether they're a bot or not, they are decidedly fake. So how can we regain authenticity? What if you want to know what a genuine real-life human being thinks about the latest Lenovo laptop? You append Reddit to your query. And then that's the concept, that you would then get to a trove of authentic humans engaging in very human ways to level up the best, highest quality signals. You get the idea. So
But I think, Tyler, a lot of people looking for that kind of information have been going to more specific sites for a long time. If you wanted a review on like a computer or something, you might go to CNET. If you want a review on, as you know, if you want a review on a hotel, you might go to Yelp or something like that. So I think people go to maybe more specific things. I think one user advantage that Google has, say, versus Reddit, is that the UI is just easier, right? Reddit is not laid out as well. You have to log in and everything. In Google, you don't have to do that. So I think Google's a long way from dying. And I think most people who are halfway intelligent figure out the ad situation. So instead of looking at the first search result on Google, you go about three or four down, because you need to go three or four down to skip the ones that are marked, by the way, that they're an ad if you actually look at it. So you just go three or four down.
right, I think we should. It'd be an interesting test. Does anyone have a good search we should try of Google versus Reddit for a second?
Anything in crypto is better in Reddit. That's a good example.
For sure. I'm trying to think of what would be a representative of a very good search, a kind of neutral search for both.
Pizza ratings for
Mm,
pizza, like seriously,
yeah, Reddit doesn't
people are gonna
do
yeah,
that.
people are gonna compare.
I think you maybe
Oh, let's do that. Let's do that.
Ukraine
Hold on,
might
hold
be a
on, hold
good
on. Oh,
subject.
hang on. Ken might be onto something. What is the best pizza in New York? Might be a good question for both. Yeah, because
That will be a problem because there are so many stores that have copied illegally the name Ray's. So you won't know one Ray from another, just like you won't know one Tommy Burger from another in LA.
but I
That
just
may be a problem.
did the search.
How about what's the best Super Bowl ad?
What is the best pizza in New York City? Reddit. Okay, so here's what happens. On the Google non-Reddit one, the first link is not an ad, it's a blog. And the title of the blog is The 24 Best Pizza Places in New York. And that one is, and then below that is people also ask. This is Google's bot, doing its thing, knowing, oh, you just searched for that. Here's what you are, other four things you might also search for next. What is considered the best pizza in New York? What is the number one pizza in America? Who has the best pizza in New York State? Does New York have the best pizza? To kind of refine your search for you based on what other people search for. And then it has 3 reviews of pizza restaurants from the businesses, the Google Maps has 3 different pizza restaurants that have somewhat high ratings. By the way, none of those are in any way regarded as the best pizzas in New York, those 3 that they list. I happen to know rather definitively what New Yorkers feel are kind of the top 10, and these 3 are not in it.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, but I do. And so now looking over at the Reddit response, the first link becomes best pizza in New York City. And wow, I have to say, the subreddit, meaning the community who answered this question, is the Ask New York City Reddit community. So these are people in New York City, thousands of them answering the question, what's the best pizza in New York City? This is going to be hard for Google to compete with because they don't have thousands of New Yorkers answering that question. So here, best pizza in New York City. I really like pizza. Are you looking for a recommendation? And you've got a whole bunch of people answering, and all the answers are ranked. And
Yeah, but what's the difference between that and Yelp? It's Yelp will give you the same thing based on user feedback, and yeah, it'll be more relevant than like a blog post somewhere.
yeah.
So, Tyler, other scenario is how do you know which are real users and which ones are bot users? Because a lot of marketing companies will use bots to go in and do reviews.
Yeah, GPT-3 would be able to provide something like that as well.
There's also factors that skew, like budget, and people with different budgets obviously have a different scale.
Yeah. Maybe take a look at
I actually use Reddit a lot to do research on technologies like blockchains because when you go on the internet, they'll always just tell you all the best things. And Reddit, you have to kind of search very specifically. But what's nice is you can kind of tell by their response and their language whether they're a bot or not because the ways human talk, especially on Reddit, you'll be able to kind of tell.
So somebody that's highly ranked on their answers names the 2 of the top 3 by pizza obsessed people, which is John's on Bleecker and DeFara's, and this guy kind of nails it, and he's ranked quite high as one of the best answers. And then here's now people are arguing with him, saying DeFara's is trash. Other people saying DeFara's is right. And then other people are saying John's a Bleecker, and yeah, they get John's and they get DeFara's. Those, I gotta say, that's what the pizza obsessed people of New York have kind of concluded, that those are the creme de la creme, and this has been an ongoing debate for a decade plus. So
Here's a thought form. Here's a thought form
Wouldn't
for you, Tyler.
wouldn't it be more helpful if there would be a matching algorithm of people? Because, people vary a lot in taste, but there are always groups that you can find that are similar to your taste. Some people genuinely, for example, like Pizza Hut or something. They just like stuff like that, and other people don't. So wouldn't it be good to have like a matching algorithm for people of different tastes, so you can find people around the world that have kind of a similar taste
not at all,
like
because
you have for all kinds of things,
no,
for
not at all.
design and food.
Not at all, because I really don't care what Swedish people think about Mexican food, because they have no concept of what Mexican food even is.
Exactly. So that's the thought form I was going to pose for you, Tyler.
Yeah, I grew up on the border of Mexico in a town that is so obsessed with Mexican food that families have split and fight forever over who has the best tortilla chips. So to us, it is religion, Mexican food. So if you ask people
Tyler,
in San Diego, what's the best? There's two types of people from San Diego. There's Roberto's people and Juanita's people. Okay, so don't get me started. I will ban you from this room. I've hired people at the search engine that I was just talking about. I hired dozens of people based on their answer to the question, Roberto's or Juanita's.
Okay, but
That's
I
how
just
Don't
much.
let
wanted to
the
say,
don't
I
let
even
think
the
in
the
Sweden, there are
employer's
probably
authority.
people that like more fresh foods and organic and whatever
Doesn't
they
matter.
want to know where it come from.
It doesn't matter because
And then there's
Roberto's is better,
people,
and that's
I
definitively.
don't give a shit,
Yeah,
but I
but you
don't give
don't
a shit,
know.
but there's
And
Change
that's
still
your
why.
search
people
Hold
when
on.
you
criteria. If
go
your
Calm
search
down,
somewhere.
calm
criteria
down.
is best pizza in New York, to Tyler's point, it's going to be by the New Yorkers. I mean, that's why you're there and that's why
Correct.
you're asking. Change your search
Correct.
criteria to whatever
Right.
you want.
so
I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I want.
exactly. But there will be still people that vary in their tastes. And if there would be an algorithm that match you closer, you could look at people that live in
It,
that
it,
place and try out things that is kind of
it's very
close to
simple.
what
That's very
you like,
simple.
just from a different.
It's very simply done. All you have to do is look at people who have, if you look at 20 choices and you had 20 exact matches, you would know that that person had a similar palate to you. So the thought form I had for you, Tyler, was, what qualifiers would you put on these things? So for one, I would like to know that someone has a track. They actually bought they made a transaction that they bought from Roberto's when they
Yelp.
bought from both, so they can prove. First thing I'd like to know is, have you eaten both? The second thing I'd like to know is, some context to the amount of money that you have, because that, obviously restricts your choices. So you may not have been able to sample Roberto's and Juanita's,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you're in a different bracket. So what
Not at all.
qualifiers would you put on
Tyler,
these
the
on these
best
things?
pizza is in Rome.
Don't get me started. So the question is, what's the best
No.
pizza in New York City? Was the original query. And to your point, Nicholas,
But
you bring up a really good point, which is Naver, the search engine in Korea. Notably, it's really about the profiles of the people answering. It becomes a big part of this, and they take great pride in being the pizza expert for this town or whatever, or the most authoritative person on the topic of pizza. They take great pride in that, and it leads to business for them. So they're competing to answer the questions, to be known and deserve the reputation statistically as having the most authoritative answers in their category, because that is how they generate real revenue for their businesses. And that's why Google has a very hard time competing in Korea against Naver, because when you ask people in Korea, why don't you use Google? They'll look at you like you're stupid, because they've invested a decade in their Naver profile of answering all these questions. And they make lots of money as being the profile that is the best pizza person in all of Korea. Google gives them none of that. So they
Tyler,
benefit not at all
Tyler,
by using Google. Now,
here's
Google knows
what if you take
that that model is superior to their model, and they are very
but what
wary
if
of anyone taking that model outside of Korea. And Quora, Charlie and Adam, was the closest thing to Naver in the U.S., and that's why Google is secretly very fascinated with Quora and would buy it in a heartbeat if it ever actually started getting any traction. And Reddit secretly has been kind of building this in disguise in a kind of an interesting way. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Tyler, what if you change the query to what do New Yorkers think the best pizza is, and for Google, and see if they are smart enough to pick on something like that?
Right. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think it changes the. Yeah, I think Google in general. I think if you're trying to find something, like, I like the question about what do New Yorkers think, because it would mean that the what gets returned are maybe documents or question or responses or content that basically has, that, let's say, assuming that that there's a journalist behind the content, that has some level of research behind it, where With Reddit, you're still getting people's experiences, and I think that's part of the challenge with this whole question of Google versus Reddit. I think Google is still useful and obviously still massive, but it's search that was originally designed for documentation. It was search designed for details, maybe about a product or a service that doesn't change, or it's not as fluid. Where if you look at something like Reddit, you have something where people are giving their personal experiences, and if you collect that together, that gives you an impression to make a decision on what type of pizza to go after or what place to go to for your pizza. And I think that becomes a different experience. I think that's the challenge that Google faces. I don't think that they're out of the game entirely. I just think the game has become much more nuanced, and it's forcing a lot of different players and people turning to different resources. It's part of the reason why Amazon has become sort of like a search engine of itself, or even if you look at YouTube being a search engine of itself. And I'll land my plane here.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Amazon is a product search leader, and it makes $30 billion now in its ad business, which it's only been growing over the last sort of 5, 6 years, I think. So you're absolutely right. But all you need is two things. You need identity, which they're all working on, Apple, Google, everybody. Plus, once you have that, plus your interactions, then Google can offer uh, deep questions as a service that can have qualifiers on them that you only want to see results, which are, from a real person where they've got a real transaction history with that outlet, for example. That's would be a way to condition the information that you're willing to receive, and they have the ability to do that.
Okay, I want to welcome Mark.
I wanted to add, when you travel, at least it used to be, when that's what was the attractive thing to travel through Airbnb, like go to Airbnb places, because then you get to know people that are really from that place and get advice and tips where to go, restaurants and stuff. At least it used to be that way when I had the Airbnb on Cape Cod. That was the main reason why people used Airbnb. So that's another way of getting this type of information.
Yeah, Airbnb has what they call guidebooks that the hosts of the Airbnbs can make a guidebook of their favorite spots in town, and they could aggregate all of those guidebooks to get what the locals hosts feel is the most highly ranked whatever. So yeah, that could work as well. Mark, who
You
just
want
joined the
something
stage,
interesting?
uh,
Google
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Google the
Hi, guys.
Apple
I
Pizza.
just wanted to point out something about the difference between platforms like Google and Yelp or Reddit. Because once you search Google for the best pizza in New York, Google will display the results that are most profitable to Google. And it really has nothing to do with the best pizza in New York. While Reddit or the other platforms will try to display the results that are actually people are talking about. So it's a very major difference that every search you make in Google, it will display the results that are profitable to the company. And this is Google's way.
Yeah,
It's not something that you can argue with.
yeah. Okay, good point. By the way, I need to check the audio over in Twitter Space. So Eric or JT or Jason, could you please say hello briefly? And I cannot hear diddly squat. That's a problem. Go ahead, Eric. Count to 10, please. Eric, please count to 10. Yeah. There you go. We got you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Now you're gone. All right.
Tyler, here's a questionable one.
1 second.
Google
Tom,
best
hold on.
pineapple pizza
Hold
in
on.
New York.
I got
Hold
it.
on.
Jason, can you unmute and count to 10, please? Or JT?
1, 2,
Okay.
3, 4,
All right.
5,
All right.
6,
All right.
7,
All right.
8, 9.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect.
Tom, you were saying.
I was saying the one that's questionable, if you Google the best pineapple pizza in New York City, has
Jesus.
higher reviews than the best pizza in New York City.
That's because the New Yorkers are correctly defending what is a pizza. Because once you've put pineapple on it, God knows you've created
Yeah,
some.
no Italian will go.
Heathen.
Yeah.
But I like to propose another way to use both sides. Actually, I think Google search still have better algorithm to search something. So I would search like what is best pizza in New York. Uh,
Vivi, hold that thought.
yeah.
I
Uh,
just have to announce I will be back in 4 minutes, so you
oh,
can keep the whole search debate going.
Okay.
oh, should I continue?
Yep.
Oh, I
Yeah,
mean,
continue.
yeah, use the Google site, but when you use Google, you can have those how to say that in like for example, you can search what is best pizza in New York, and then you add the site, and then you add Reddit.com to it. Then you can search the result for the Reddit site. So,
No, that's exactly what Tyler did just now.
oh no, I think he just he directly searched inside the Reddit, not for the
No, that
Google
okay.
site.
Yeah, okay.
So it's different method, and you can see the result in Google. Actually, I think it's
yeah, that's exactly what he did just now.
oh, really? Oh, I think he put it inside the Reddit. Oh, sorry.
I think we also need to examine the type of query that people do because in this case, we're talking about these recommendations, and you can find recommendations, as was noted, with Airbnb reviews, Yelp, um, uh, even the Google reviews. But if you were sort of doing sort of brass tacks type query in terms of, let's say, for instance, what I did recently, I was one of my lightning cables from my iPhone wasn't working, and I noticed that the tip was corroded. So I did a Google search trying to determine what was the best way to clean the contacts on the lightning cable so that the lightning cable would work again. Um, and it actually came up with Reddit posts really high up because that was where it was being discussed, where people actually gave valid, um, um, you know, uh, uh, background and information on how to clean your lightning cable contacts. So that was kind of an interesting thing. So the delineation of recommendations, I find that's uh, the recommendation type of queries, that is where you can see like Nextdoor. The Nextdoor app is being replicated within Facebook with the Google, or I should say the Facebook neighborhoods. I should say they're trying to capitalize on neighborhood recommendations within Facebook and keep people from going over to Nextdoor. So that's a careful consideration that people need to make, that recommendations are a type of query.
Yeah, but I would look at the incentives. So the type of query is relevant there, but also layered. Whoever brought that up earlier is what is that platform being incented for? So if Google didn't have a paid sponsor that wanted that search result, i.e., a lightning cable company that said we want people who are looking to clean it to come and land on our ad that says you can't clean it and you have to buy a new one. I mean, so they didn't have the ad generated commitments there because again, Google's ad is their top incentive is those sponsored ads at the top of the page, whereas Reddit is user driven.
Okay. Tyler, are you back? If not, let's move on to the next article. I'll just read it. Blind patients with second sights, electronic retina implants are in danger of losing their artificial vision as the tech becomes obsolete and unsupported. Oh no. Okay, next one will be Senators Blumenthal D and
Cheryl, I would comment on that
go ahead.
last one if I may.
Yes,
So
please.
so this is a really big problem in the Internet of Things area as well,
Mm.
because when you blend the digital thing with something else, of course, in the example is a biological thing, but also when you blend it with a mechanical thing, they age at different rates and they need upgrades at different rates. And that means that at some point you need to upgrade the thing. The way of upgrading one the other thing and replace it with something new. Now, in the Internet of Things space, that particular problem is being helped by the fact that appliances and devices and all manner of things aren't built like they used to. Like, for example, refrigerators and heavy appliances are now built literally to be replaced every 5-6 years instead of every 20 years. But even 6-7 years is too long for digital. And how do you upgrade the digital without replacing the whole thing is a big problem. Of course, when you apply it to biological, where you obviously cannot upgrade the biological thing, That's even a bigger problem. Now, sometimes you can over provision and just include more of the digital stuff than you think you need in the hopes that later on you can, add at least through software or something.
I'm
But
back.
even that is just a really big problem. That's I'm done.
Okay, so we're back. Should we jump into the next one?
Yes, please.
Okay, next one is blind patients.
Oh, we just did this. The next one.
Okay, next is Washington Post. Senators Richard Blumenthal and Marsha Blackburn unveil the Kids Online Safety Act, requiring online platforms to offer users under 16 years of age extra safety and privacy tools. Wow, that is politicians becoming product managers. I don't know if we want that. It depends on what the bill says, I guess. A bipartisan pair of senators, one Democrat, one Republican, on Wednesday unveiled a sweeping bill that aims to give parents more control over their children's time online. Well, that sounds good, and on the front of it, the bill would require companies to provide parents and minors with new controls and create new obligations for platforms to address self-harm, eating disorders, and other content that might harm children and teens. So far, so good. Co-sponsored by the two senators, the Kids Online Safety Act would require online platforms to provide parents and minors younger than 16 with easy-to-use tools to keep them safe, limit screen time, and protect their data. It would demand companies create tools to allow parents to track how much time their kids spend on a service. Doesn't Apple already do that? Or to opt out of features such as autoplay and that might extend time online. Companies would also have to offer parents and minors the ability to modify tech companies' recommendation algorithms. What? Okay, that how?
Yeah,
How?
no way. Now they've overstepped it. I mean, they run on algorithms. That's what they do. That's, as you said, that's
Right.
part of the product. How can they override an algorithm?
And allowing them to limit or ban certain types of content. Okay. Well, that gets very interesting.
It would have to be tagged. How would they, again, similarly, how are they going to define that? The platform would have to tag it, and then,
Right.
we're already
Right.
back into this whole issue of moderating. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Because let's think this through for a second. They're going to, just as an example, pick something like self harm, like cutting or whatever. And that's going to become a category. And then you, as a parent, are going to say, okay, yeah, I don't want my child exposed to self harm or eating disorders. Okay, great. No, now I feel my child's not going to be seeing eating disorder videos. Okay, now how does that work technically on the platform's back end, where they now have to semantically know and somehow magically tag all videos that mention eating disorders will be put into that category. Now, the who's loving this is Accenture, because now the algorithms don't exist to self identify those and bucketize those correctly. That's going to have to be done with humans.
Well, Tyler, I think this is the entire, social media dilemma, right? Their business model is entirely dependent on human beings, right? The product is just being the human being themselves. So they're selling ads and things like that because we are all addicted to it. So they give us something that can actually make us like a drug, be addicted, be there, be always on the hook. That's how they make money. That's what the ad revenue is all about. So when they are really making a business model that works like that, then they are in trouble for the drawback of it. So that's the huge, billion-dollar question of all this social media dilemma, from Facebook, from the leak, and all those things that we talked about for months, if you remember, to everyone, is to Spotify, really, that when you have a product that's really dependent on human emotion and human beings being the product themselves, then who decides what is that product that someone else shouldn't be looking at. And they also depend on the growing their business on the growing generation, kids. So how do they fix that? That's the biggest question, right?
Yeah, but let me just jump in because the algorithms aren't saying post or enhance eating disorders. They're putting in what people like you stay on longer. And if that's eating disorders or car ads or whatever it is, it's that's what's getting served up. So regulating the algorithms and how much they amplify, that is the way to go at something. Again, sort of like these algorithms do, they amplify certain types of content, but not based on what's in the content. It's based on users reactions to that content. So I mean, I assert that algorithms should be regulated, but this isn't the way. You can't override an algorithm. It would be going back to Section 230 and saying, look, if you guys have these algorithms that amplify this stuff versus natural search, then that's a moderation because you're amplifying something that beyond the original post. So it's not, you can't go in and say, I don't want my child looking at eating disorders. That's going to take all that human, as you say, overlay, tagging it, and that's just going to cause users to go, it's not an eating disorder, I have healthy eating, I'm eating all natural foods, that's why I look like this. And that's, so don't dare post me as an eating disorder. So again, that's a pretty murky approach by the senators, and it's just a lot of I think clickbait for votes.
Okay. The next article is that it's a sister article from the Financial Times. California lawmakers plan to introduce a bill with bipartisan support protecting the online data of children, similar to the UK's age-appropriate design code. Okay, and it sounds very similar, honestly. Bill aims to mirror children's code as policymakers seek to rein in world's biggest tech companies. California lawmakers plan to introduce a new bill to protect children's data online on Thursday. That's tomorrow, mirroring the UK's recently introduced children's code as part of a growing momentum globally for stricter regulation on big tech. The California Age-Appropriate Design Code bill will require many of the world's biggest tech companies' platforms headquartered in California, such as social media group Meta and Google's YouTube, to limit the amount of data they collect from young users and the location tracking of children in the state. If it is passed into law, it will also place restrictions on profiling younger users for targeting advertising, mandate the introduction of age-appropriate content policies. Oh, here we go again. Mandate the introduction of age-appropriate content policies, meaning they won't be able to see adult content or anything deemed adult content, which is what?
Well, you're supposed to be 13 to join Facebook anyways, right?
Right. So this is ostensibly for people 13 to 16.
Yeah, but Tyler, the thing is, this is the big issue. Nobody enforces. Like, how do they enforce this under 13, under 16? Under 18 is usually enforced by using a credit card because under 18, you're not supposed to have a credit card, but they just use their parents. So, again, a lot of these lines is like, how do you define it and how do you enforce it? Kids at, I don't know, 8 or 9, can bypass their parents' permission controls. So, you got to look at who has the devices and et cetera. But a lot of this stuff is going to be really challenging. Lawyers field day, so good for me, but it's not necessarily the best approach.
I suspect there'd be a very powerful lobbying backlash because if you grant that to underage 12, why not to underage 15? Why not to underage 18? Why not to underage 21? And how does that not become the slippery slope that kills the business model of FANG?
Yeah. Anywho, next.
Tyler?
Yes.
I think as a politician, though, you have to look like you're taking action. And I think whether or not whatever you propose becomes law, you can now point to it as having tried to fix the problem.
Right.
And this is also, it kind of goes back to a quote I like to use that incompetence invites micromanagement. If the technology companies don't do it themselves, then they invite the politicians to become the product managers that they should have installed themselves. So that's a market need that they're ignoring.
Interesting point. And,
Thank you.
but looking at the big picture here, it's essentially providing tools to help parents become better parents who are not being good parents. So you're helping bad parents become decent parents with digital tools. Do we believe that parents actually, if given the tools, will become better parents.
Can I comment on that,
Please.
Tyler? I think what you're saying is valid, and I think the purpose of these laws is not to help all parents, but those who really are going to do it. That's point one. Point two is really depends on how you characterize the threat. If the threat is like the parent can say, just stay, don't cross the street when cars are coming, that's one thing. But when bullets are being fired at you, that's a different thing. And I think that weaponized information, to me, really is like firearms, maybe worse. And that does require regulation beyond what a reasonable parent would do.
I think it also helps the parents to know what they can do. I think that's also part of the problem with technology. If you tell someone to, if you're telling someone to be safe, if we're telling people to during this pandemic, and there's things you can tell them to do certain things, stay at home, wash your hands, put a mask on. With technology, not everyone has the same knowledge or the same perspective, which I think makes it a little hard to when you give a message of saying you need to be safe online. Well, if everyone's got different laptops, different browsers, and different experiences, sometimes it's hard to know what's the common thing that you can at least start with to take action. And I think that's what part of this bill is trying to address, particularly with kids and children. I'll leave that there.
Okay. Next up is Nigerian payment startup Flutterwave raises $250 million at $3 billion, and that was the story that Messi brought up before we jumped into the big headlines. But there it is. It's one of the big headlines, like number 7. And somewhere number 8 is that Facebook rebrands its news feed as the feed, or just feed, after more than 15 years. The news feed is now just feed. Meta is changing the name of Facebook's news feed, the primary part of the service that users scroll through to see what their friends and family have shared, to feed. And the next one is that Twitter expands a beta test of what they call safety mode, which temporarily blocks accounts using harmful language in replies. To 50% of users in the US and 5 other markets, Twitter is broadening access to a feature called safety mode, designed to give users a set of tools to defend themselves against the toxicity and abuse that is still far too often a problem on Twitter. First introduced to a small group of testers last September, safety mode will today launch into beta for more users across English-speaking markets, including the US, UK, Canada, Australia, Ireland, and New Zealand. The company says the expanded access will allow it to collect more insights into how well safety mode works and learn what sorts of improvements still need to be made. Alongside the rollout, safety mode will also prompt users when they may need to enable it, Twitter notes. As a public social platform, Twitter faces a continual struggle with conversation health. Over the years, it's rolled out a number of tweaks and updates in an attempt to address the issue, including features that would automatically hide unpleasant and insulting replies back behind an extra click, allowing users to limit who could reply to their tweets, let users hide themselves from search, and warn users about conversations that are starting to go off the rails, among other things. But safety mode is more of a defensive tool than one designed to proactively nudge conversations in the right direction. It works by automatically blocking accounts for 7 days, which are replying to the original poster with harmful language or sending uninvited repetitive replies, like insults and hateful remarks or mentions. During the time that safety mode is enabled, those blocked accounts will be unable to follow the original poster's Twitter account, see their tweets and replies, or send them direct messages. Twitter's algorithms determine which accounts to temporarily block by assessing the language used in the replies and examining the relationship between the tweet's author and those replying. If the poster follows the replier or interacts with the replier frequently, for example, the account won't be blocked. The idea with safety mode is to give users under attack a way to quickly put up a defensive system without having to manually block each account that's harassing them, a near impossibility when a tweet goes viral, exposing the poster to elevated levels of abuse. This situation is one that happens not only to celebs and public figures whose cancellations make the headlines, but also to female journalists, members of marginalized communities, and even everyday people at times. It's also not a problem unique to Twitter, etc. You know what? In the time that it took me to read that article, I went from not liking this idea to loving it, and let me explain why. And I'm curious how other people feel about it, because at first I thought this is Twitter automating, kind of semi-silencing people, temporarily silencing folks through an automated type system. And I kind of didn't like the concept of that until I realized that I'm just imagining what the conversations were inside the meetings that they had when designing this. And I have to imagine they realized that one of the main reasons people stop tweeting, they want people to tweet more. And the reason people stop tweeting is because they fear negative replies, and which is inevitable on the interwebs because there's a whole lot of poo-poo heads out there. And how do we keep an environment where when you tweet, you get nice, uplifting, positive responses? Because that's positive reinforcement to keep you tweeting. Inevitably, you're going to get, the internet being the guard, what it is, you're going to get a whole bunch of those poo-poo heads responding. How do we minimize the poo-poo head responses? And that's kind of on the face of it, what this is about, is silencing the poo-poo heads, and for the purpose of creating an environment that is more encouraging of people expressing themselves safely on Twitter.
Tyler, Twitter lets you do that now. You can choose who's allowed to respond. You can say everybody, or just people I follow, or just people you've like mentioned in in the tweet. I mean, you have some control.
True. Anyhow, interesting new approach, safety mode for people who are sensitive. Because by the way, when you're starting out on the interwebs for the first time, you are often very overwhelmed and surprised just how vitriolic a lot of people are. There's a lot of angry people out there who use platforms like Twitter as punching bags because they hate themselves and they hate life, and that's just reality. And very unfortunate that those people do this quite regularly. And by the way, I believe that's part of the reason why people are moving to LinkedIn to express themselves, because of you're tied to your identity. It's more professional. You're much less likely to get a bunch of vitriolic responses in LinkedIn. I don't know if other people are noticing this. So I think this might be their way to kind of address that. And in that sense, I like the big picture idea going on here. The devil's in the details and in the execution, of course, and how to do this in a way that's more about. And yeah, it's opt-in for the people who choose to be in the safe thing if they feel they need it. If that creates an environment where they now feel more enabled to contribute on Twitter, hey, cool. I go for that, I guess. So the next one is a coalition of crypto companies, including Coinbase, Circle, and Robinhood. Those are some big names in the crypto space. Announced something called Trust, an anti-money laundering platform for securely sharing customer data. Oh, interesting. A coalition of U.S. crypto firms has created a centralized solution to the information sharing requirements of the travel rule. Is Nicholas still with us? Damn it, Nicholas, where'd you go? Right when we needed you.
Yeah, he texted me and said he got to run. You want me to get him back?
Yeah, it says the solution called Trust is a platform governed by the participating exchanges that allows members to securely transmit customer information. That's cool. The group plans to expand the solution globally over time. The coalition of it's called Trust. The travel rule has long been part of the banking world, but until recently, crypto lacked the infrastructure to comply. Now, a group of the U.S.'s biggest crypto players have rolled out a solution in the form of Trust. And it's a whole bunch of them, like 30 of them currently. Coinbase heads up the coalition, announcing a white paper. The solution allows information to be directly transmitted between the platform's members through end-to-end encrypted channels. It allows for proof of address ownership, which lets financial institutions prove they are the intended recipient of the customer's information before the information is transmitted. Huh.
That could be very, very useful for a lot of things because there have been issues with traditional bank wires. You know, if if you transcribe a number wrong, or there've been people spoofing. You know, they've been phishing for like your emails. They get into your emails. I mean, this happened to a friend of mine, um, and he was expecting a wire, and they knew he was expecting a wire because they had hacked his computer, and they made it look like it was the other. They made themselves look like they were the other company, and he accidentally sent them the wire, okay, rather than the legitimate company, and he's out $15,000, and you can't get it back. You know, I mean, so there's a lot of good things that may come out of that if you've got better proof of who what an entity is, particularly before you send them money or crypto, whatever.
And somebody tweeted saying, watching Silicon Valley learn in real time why it costs money to send money, which is kind of an interesting point, which is the additional layers of plumbing that the banking world established over time. Anyway, but Nicholas.
Everything that crypto is promising turns out to be more, vaporware or closer to dreams than actual, benefits from cryptocurrencies. So, we're learning.
So the next topic is Google.
Wait. Hey, Tyler,
Yeah.
really quickly on this one. It's also because they're all coming under fire for the anti-money laundering and tracking their users because a lot of these sites don't implement those rules as strictly as they should. And it's also a really good point that these aren't decentralized. Again, your on and off ramps to all of these platforms are very centralized, and here's just another layer. So it's again for tracking.
Okay. Google announces early access to Chrome OS Flex, a version of Chrome OS for business and schools that is designed to run on old PCs and Macs. Okay, that's cool. Next up, Roblox did their quarter earnings and misses with their quarterly revenue of a very tiny half a billion dollars, but it was under the estimated 600 million. They came in with 568 million versus 604 estimated. That's missing. That's bad. But they were up 83% year over year. Now the stock has dropped 20% because they missed on their earnings. That's unfortunate. The next is from
That goes
Washington.
back to but Tyler, that goes back to what I spoke about valuations. If your valuation isn't wild, you can miss and report a respectable quarter where you're actually growing, but you miss estimates and not have your stock down 24%. But when your valuation is building in perfection and everything's going to go right for the next 20 years without a blip, then you get that.
Mm-hmm. Washington Post. Twitter says the new CEO, Parag Agrawal, will take a few weeks of parental leave, less than 3 months after taking the job, a rare move for a Silicon Valley CEO. Parag Agrawal, 37 years old, is just getting started in one of the technology industry's high-profile jobs as Twitter CEO, and he's taking a few weeks off for parental leave.
Good for him. Good job.
Yeah. The next is from The Verge, that Uber will let riders see a breakdown of their average ratings starting today and publishes data on U.S. cities with the highest and lowest ratings. Very interesting. So for those who don't know, of course, everyone who's ever ridden in an Uber knows that you rate your driver, and many drivers don't realize that the riders are also being rated by the drivers. And when you request an Uber, the drivers see your score, and that determines how many of them want to pick you up. And if you have a very low score, you'll have less people that want to pick you up, and your cost will be higher. And again, I think most Uber riders aren't aware of this. I love this. By the way, the same is true in Airbnb, of course, where the guest reviews the host, and the host reviews the guests, and the hosts look at the reviews to determine if I want to allow you to stay at my place. And you now have less opportunities of places to stay if you have low ratings. The question is, what if those two merged? What if those two started sharing databases, Airbnb and Uber? And what if 30 other platforms all started doing the same? And what if Starwood Hotels, which owns a big chunk of the hotels in America, and they have their own internal rating system because they have a network of thousands of hotels. What if they started partnering with other massive hotel chains, and there became this massive social credit system, but not run by the government, run by the companies, a private social credit system, which would companies could now rate consumers all the damn time.
But Tyler,
Yes.
doesn't that open up, for kind of not really genuine, kind of, rating or kind of giving reviews? I mean, we all know what happened with Amazon reviews, right? So there was really not true. I am, as a person, really avid reader of reviews before I buy anything new on Amazon. And then I was quite shocked when I realized the reviews weren't actually, some of them were fake, but being co-opted by the company itself or the sellers itself or things like that. So when incentive and profit gets combined by the private sector themselves, then what happens?
Oh, here, check this out. So the top highest average rider ratings among large U.S. cities, and the top 10 lowest average rider ratings among you. Oh, this should be fun. This is a great opportunity to play our favorite game show called Tech News Jeopardy. So, what are the highest rider rated cities? The cities with the highest scored riders.
New York.
Seattle.
New York.
Copenhagen.
Houston.
Denver.
New York.
Tokyo.
But the question is also a little bit like,
Austin.
Only
what
for,
else you mean by
only for
over?
U.S. Only America.
Austin, Texas.
New York.
New Orleans.
Portland.
Who said?
Hawaii.
Wait. Who said Austin, Texas?
David. David.
David wins. The answer was San Antonio, but that's close enough.
That's just as far from Houston.
You're right. You guys can share that one, Jason. So Jason and David can share that one.
Any
So
correlation?
is
The
this
people there
is
are
this
more friendly
rating?
or what?
So the riders of San Antonio have the highest average rider score, followed by St. Louis, Nashville, Salt Lake City, Kansas City, Sacramento, Tampa Bay, Charlotte, Las Vegas, and Portland. Now we get to do the even more fun question: which city has the lowest average rider score?
New York City.
Los
New
Angeles.
York.
San
Boston.
But
Francisco.
Boston.
Tyler, I
Wait.
have a question actually. Like when you
New York.
say lowest rider, is that like the rating or any kind of feedback that they get?
The rating.
Because only
New
five
York.
stars system.
New York.
New York, Boston, or San Francisco.
New York or San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Chicago.
Boston.
Florida.
A lot of people get a point on this one. It is New York City, followed by Seattle, Washington, Boston. So I think the winner is the person who kept saying New York and Boston, because you got two of the top four. Minneapolis, San Francisco. A lot of people said Philadelphia. Nobody said and should have said Los Angeles. Somebody did say Baltimore. People should have said Baltimore if you've ever been there, and Chicago. But New York definitely wins, and I think in part because you have tourists there who feel like they can do what they want to do because they're on, away from home, and they're not going to be held accountable. So,
No, Tyler, I have a better explanation for that.
Go ahead. since I've been driving for 15,000 trips, I know the people coming from New York are rated by the drivers from New York, and they're the most probably disrupted population into by Uber, so that they dislike passengers and get treated probably by passengers like crap. So Yeah. it's a feedback mechanism. Yeah. So when I get passengers from New York, I always see their score as at least a tenth to two tenths lower than everybody else's. Yeah. I don't
So
doubt.
unless you want your score destroyed, don't use your Uber account in New York and Boston and Washington.
No, in those markets, here's my advice: tip with cash. That way, they always give you 5 stars. They don't. You don't. As a driver, you don't know you're tipped until after the fact. So Mm. you don't have a way to send the algorithm any other message than I don't want that person, and you give them a crappy rating. It's a really weird feedback mechanism. But to Messi's comment, there's no way to be a bot. These are all transactions. If I could channel Nicholas for a second, the trust in the network is actual transaction. Who's spending $100,000 faking an Uber account? Nobody. So it's
But
real money every time.
under this kind of system, isn't it too easy to pin down the person or the driver that give you the 1 star? Because it's not like you're having a ride every day. No, I mean every minute. So it's like you just have the ride per day or 2 rides per
So
day.
my ratings are my last 500 rated trips. Some trips are not rated. So someone that gives me a 1 star, I have a 4.9 rating. I
Yeah,
It's
but
pretty
I
high.
mean, it's easy for you to understand or just
Here's
to.
how I rarely I'll just give you the insight, the mind of a driver who's done lots of drives, who could be doing other things, but does it to get my own version of the media, because there's no good media locally in Austin. They've have teleprompter readers from Sinclair Broadcasting for more than a decade here. All the growth has been on top of people who just have to get news on their own, which is kind of why I'm in this group. So anyway, um, one way to get real stories is to let people say stupid shit in the back of my my car, or let them have wonderful conversations. I had a federal judge tell me to run for political office last year. I also heard a defense attorney that I got his number because I would get him because I know he knows how the system works. Had two different judges in the county nearby here. I'll leave it that open ended. Have judges in chambers ask for campaign donations last October. So if you tell me it's not a poll tax that you have to be a lawyer to run for judge. But anyway, back to Uber. I can only tell the algorithm by having a 3 star or lower that I never want that person again. So I can, in an asymmetric way, never get that person again if it's a bad experience, and not worry about how I have to comport myself to each person, because I'm just a real nice, respectful person. But over the pandemic, I stopped driving at night because of the risk tolerance that people that serially go out are have gotten even more entitled, and they're not fun to take a bunch of alcoholics around. Um, but in general, if you want to have a high rating, tip cash and talk about how you just make it a good experience for the driver, respect them, and you'll get a 5 star rating in most cities. If you're in New York, use cash. Chicago, same thing, because nothing speaks more in this economy than incentives. Back to Nicholas.
I wonder if there's an additional layer that they add weights that, like credibility. Because if it's like, oh, this driver is constantly rating people really low and those people characteristically are rated very high, maybe this driver is a douchebag and should lower their weight.
Maybe, but it also it tells you how many trips I've done relative. So they're tomorrow, they're actually just about to push this thing, Tyler, that's going to let me shop a select, they haven't rolled it out, so I haven't seen what it does, but it'll be interesting. If there was a reporter they wanted to get on, I've got, 15,000 screenshots in the last 6 months of how lowball Uber Eats is. Anyway, I don't want to dominate the stage. What do you
I
mean?
have a question
How
as
low ball?
L.
Hold
Oh,
on
go
now.
ahead.
He was just dropping some juice there. What do you mean low balling on Uber Eats? Oh, here's how I can shop. It's asymmetric on Uber Eats. I get to see where it's going and how much it's going to be. But all my Uber trips, I don't find out where I'm going until I start the trip. Oh, so that's because if you did, you would not you would accept much less rides, and they need you to accept those rides. Oh, he just got a phone call, right?
Exactly.
That sucks. Probably
But
it's probably Uber's attorneys calling him. Yeah, go ahead, El.
My question is though, with the whole rating system, New York is like a transient place. There's so many people from everywhere, and maybe they take the trips there. So could the numbers be skewed because of that as well?
It's just
Like
because
people who are not necessarily from New York, but they're just, they're
it's.
there.
I think it's because part of the culture of New York is just being a bit abrasive, and it's very different from Austin, Texas.
Very stressed there, stress out.
Because I'll be honest, they're terrible in Miami. Like because of all the visitors and the tourists from all over the place. They They are, are, t- t- agree with Elle on that one. Miami yeah, Ubers are the worst at yeah. times. hmm And
So
they
Ryan,
actually go around in traffic on purpose when you're traveling there. They're like, it's kind of funny. They actually know the way to get somewhere, but they'll take the long way that they'll get stuck in traffic, and you're stuck. You can't say anything.
Messi, when is your Tech News Africa?
In half
30
an
minutes?
hour.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to breeze through this in the next 30 minutes here. So
Okay.
Shopify just had their quarterly earnings, revenue up 41% year over year. GMV rose 32 year over year. It says they did very well on the numbers, but importantly, they said that for the fiscal year 2022, upcoming revenue growth will be below fiscal year 2021. And that means downward guidance, and investors don't like that. And so the question is, why do companies do that? Well, there's all kinds of reasons why they might do that, but that has led to, in many investors, selling. So the shares have dropped 14%, even though they did great for the past 3 months. Benedict Evans took to Twitter to say that Shopify's results today demonstrate the impossibility of competing with Amazon's monopoly of e-commerce. Anyone else with a take on that, or we'll jump to the next one? Going once, going twice. Okay. The next one, Genesis, which develops low-code tools for the financial industry, raises $200 million from Tiger Global. The Financial Times says that they have sources that the UK Home Office is seeking changes to the online safety bill to require platforms, like Facebook and whatnot, monitor legal but harmful content, worrying the tech industry. Yeah, that would worry them. But again, who's loving that is the content moderators like Accenture and TaskUs, my friends Jasper and Bryce. Radical powers in online bill would increase liability of global internet groups beyond current global regulation. You know what's interesting about this as I say this? I often refer to my friends at TaskUs who do content moderation for all the top big platforms, who obviously are going to love that new bill that's coming out that's going to force these platforms to do more moderation, because it says right there in the headline that it's going to require the platforms to monitor legal but harmful content. How the hell are you going to do that? So you're going to need humans to do that. There are not algorithms in place to do that. So again, Accenture and TaskUs are going to love that, because that's who's going to get that money to do that. Now, guess what else? Check this out, y'all. You want a little inside scoop? I got a little inside scoopy scoop for you right here. Are you ready? Guess who just bought half of TaskUs for around $1 billion from my dear friends Jasper and Bryce?
Cisco?
BlackRock.
Oh.
Now, is it possible that BlackRock, who made that acquisition about 6 months ago, is now whispering in the ear of politicians, hey, you know what you should do is require these platforms to stop hurting kids by having them remove this harmful content? Just a little food. Okay. So the next one is Ericsson CEO says that Ericsson might have made payments to ISIS to gain access to transportation routes in Iraq in 2018, causing shares to drop by over 8.5%. Ericsson may have. I might have. Who knows? We're not really sure. If we might have sent some money to ISIS, maybe, possibly. Who's to know? Could have happened. Could have. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible. Anything's possible. Could have happened. We pay a lot of people a lot of stuff. Anyway, by the I way, thought it was by the not way, directly to ISIS. I mean, it was probably some type of fake company, and then I'll tell you ISIS. It what. was like an ISIS related, not I'm a directly to little. them, right? Call me skeptical because Ericsson still owes me tens of thousands of dollars in event sponsorship fees that they did. The logo was on the website, on the T-shirt, on the badge. They were on stage, and they haven't paid the invoice. So I'm not so sure they're paying ISIS, because maybe you know what, that just gives me a great idea. Maybe I should readdress my invoice as from ISIS, and then let's see if that gets the invoice paid. And I will follow up with you and let you know if you know what. Does anyone have the logo of the Taliban flag or the ISIS flag I could put on my invoice and resubmit that thing, and let's see if Ericsson pays it then. Let's see what happens. I'll let you know. So
Tyler, why is it so hard to get paid from a major company like for Ericsson? They
they
didn't go bankrupt or anything, right?
no,
So
they haven't gone bankrupt. No, they make it ridiculously difficult to submit invoices.
I'm going to give you a trick, Tyler. I've used with sometimes large companies with situations like this, and
Okay.
you got a lot of connections.
Okay.
Whoever you're dealing with, just go around them, go directly to the CFO, and then
Okay.
you'll probably get paid.
So the next one is Australian HR service called Employment Hero raises a bunch of money at a unicorn valuation. So Australia just got themselves another unicorn. Congrats to all of our friends down under. That's great for them. And then we've got a whole bunch of other people raised. Canada startup called Paper, which is doing educational tools for high schools in the US and Canada, raised a bunch of money. Chinese online streaming service Bilibili plans to hire 1,000 censors after the death of a 25-year-old worker. And they currently have 2,413 censors, and they want to hire 1,000 more. This content human moderation thing is becoming a very big thing. And BlackRock made a very genius investment in Taskus, I must say. And what else? Just a ton. Airbnb did their quarterly earnings report, and they brought in 1.5 billion, and the expectation was 1.4. So that's great for them. Google rolls out Docs updates, including pageless formats. Coinbase partners with Remitly on a pilot to let people in Mexico receive and convert crypto transfers into pesos. And the SEC is probing if Binance properly disclosed to consumers the relationship between its U.S. arm and two market makers with ties to Binance co-founder or founder. And Microsoft rolls out the Amazon App Store preview, offering 1,000 Android apps in the Microsoft Store alongside other tweaks. And that covers your... Oh, the European Commission approves plans for a $6 billion satellite internet system to rival SpaceX, despite previous objections from its internal watchdog. Wow, Europe, the European Commission is going to compete with SpaceX on satellite internet. That's interesting. Okay, so now we get into the tweets. Actually, let's do a refresh on the page, Cheryl, before we do that and see if there's any new ones. There's not. Okay, great. So now we get into the tweets. So the first tweet that I have today is from Katerina, that Twitter will now let all iOS and Android users record Twitter Spaces, which is relevant to our friends over here in Twitter Space right now, where we've got several dozen people over there listening to Tech News Around the World on the Twitter Space. like Katie and Professor Ostef and JT and Eric and Jason and every Messi's over there too. And good to see you all over there. So that's great. And now you can record the spaces on Android and iOS. That's great. Next is from Valerie that Disney named an executive to oversee their metaverse strategy. So here comes Disney in the metaverse. And the next one is from Jeff G. That from the New York Times that Hong Kong can't live can't live with coronavirus. And it can't stop coronavirus either, as Omicron surge has exposed the weaknesses of a system that was once a world leader in containing the coronavirus. That's a really interesting point. Hong Kong was indeed one of the best at managing COVID until relatively very recently. And now Omicron has come in and is kicking their booty. And that's Omicron can't be dealt with like a normal, the previous versions, variations of COVID, because it's just way too transmissible. So that's it's unfortunate. China as well is about to appears China's about on the precipice of having a full blown Omicron explosion. Yeah.
Tyler, but so many European countries are gonna lift all the restrictions. So it seems like we are living in a parallel universe, the Westerns, the
Yes.
Eastern
The
world.
difference is that the Europeans had vaccines that limit the really strong negative outcomes, and China's vaccines haven't been able to really manage as well. So we'll see, because you're basically talking about you're talking about Scandinavia, where I
Denmark as well, and of course UK. So
well, Denmark's part of
by it,
Scandinavia. Yeah,
Denmark is gonna lift all the
China.
restrictions as well.
Yeah, it's Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Norway. It's the Nordics who are basically lifting restrictions. Well, the Nordics happen to be very highly vaccinated. So that means even if Omicron's going around everywhere, when you have a place that's so highly vaccinated, you're not going to have a whole lot of casualties. In China, people are vaccinated, but not with a vaccine that does much. So you could still have lots of trouble due to the different vaccine that's available in China versus what's available in Scandinavia. So let's see what happens. But and let's hope.
Tyler,
Yes,
Netherlands is lifting it on the 25th.
there we go. The next is from Jeff G. from the New York Post. Here's how much U.S. inflation would rise if Russia invaded Ukraine. U.S. inflation, already stuck at a 40-year high of 7.5%, could spike to 10% or higher if Russia invades Ukraine, according to new analysts. That would suck. That's because oil prices could rise to well over $100 a barrel if Russia, a major oil producer, has its global supply lines interrupted, either by sanctions or by conflict. Pain at the pump could ripple across the entire U.S. economy, according to the analysts, sending prices sharply higher on everything from gas to groceries. The study, which is done by consulting firm RSM and reported by CNN, found that the crisis in Eastern Europe would trigger the fastest rate in U.S. inflation since 1981. Oil prices alone could rise to $110 or beyond from their current levels of just $90. Quote, we're talking about real short-term shock. Heating the home and putting gasoline in the car will become more expensive in the immediate aftermath of a Russian invasion. Russia is the world's second largest exporter of both oil and natural gas. Meanwhile, President Biden has vowed that any Russian military incursion into Ukraine would result in swift and severe sanctions against Moscow. American and European officials fear that any sanctions against Russia's financial institutions would result in retaliation from the Kremlin, including cutting off supply of oil and natural gas from Russia to Europe, which could crimp supplies and send prices spiraling higher. Last week, analysts at JP Morgan Chase predicted that a Russia-Ukraine crisis would send oil prices even higher than the RMS analysts predicted, to around $120 per barrel. Americans are already paying sky-high prices at the pump thanks to record levels of inflation not seen in 40 years. The national average for regular gasoline hit $3.50 a gallon on Tuesday, up from around $2.50 a year ago. And consumer prices have surged 7.5% from last year. The latest spike, which increases in the cost of food, electricity, and rent were among the largest contributors to the red hot rate. Though excluding food and gas, the consumer price index rose 6%. The inflation rate in the U.S. averaged, who cares? But you get the point. That could be every point additional percent of inflation sets the stage for a potential runaway inflation. And that's what's so dangerous about that. Great point to consider. The next is from Alex Garza, who also shares the article about Uber will now break down your rider ratings. And then Dan in the audience shares this interesting one from CNBC that China adds more companies to an industry body designed to develop the Chinese metaverse. China's metaverse industry body is tasked with developing standards and technology around the metaverse. And that's a really wild, interesting concept because China has its own internet, essentially. So how the hell are they going to control the metaverse? They're going to need their own metaverse separate from the Western, for lack of a better word, metaverse, because they need to control everything that's being said at all times in their metaverse, which means you will not be allowed in it because they can't control what you say. So it'll be uniquely for people in their jurisdiction. And how are they going to police everything? Well, they'll police it not so differently than how they police all of the mobile apps right now. They're going to need to know who you are. You're going to need to be approved with your face and your address and your voice and everything about you and where your parents are, and before you can say or do anything in their metaverse. And if you do or say anything out of line, the plug will be pulled instantly. And that's what happens to the live streamers in China. If you're live streaming in China, and there's tons of live streaming in China, live streaming is massively, insanely huge in China. And every live streamer's face has facial recognition. And if a face that isn't recognized by the system tries to join the live stream abruptly ends because they don't know who you are and they can't risk you saying things that they don't like. So you can imagine by extension how the metaverse would then work. It's only going to be allowed for people who they can track very closely. And if you say anything that they don't approve of, you will be immediately dealt with. So the next one is from Eric over there in the Twitter space stage from Condé Nast Travelers about something called Reef Suites, Australia's first underwater hotel. The hotel has just 2 suites suspended beneath a floating pontoon. So it looks like an oil rig, essentially, that's floating on the water. And above the water is what seems to be the restaurant and the reception and the hotel services. And what's below the water is the hotel rooms. Kind of a cool idea. The next one is from Katerina that says how a gene variant protects against Alzheimer's. The P522R gene variant increases expression levels of severe microglia genes, which are reduced in people with Alzheimer's disease. So the gene variant increases expression levels of several microglia genes, which are reduced in people with Alzheimer's. And hold that thought, because there's a similar article, also from Katerina, about something called jumping genes. Human gut bacteria have sex to share vitamin B12. Essential nutrients pass between cells via jumping genes. Your gut bacteria need vitamin B12 just as much as you do. And then again, hold that thought, because the next one is about the first gene therapy for what's called Tay-Sachs disease successfully given to 2 children. About 1 in 300 people in the general population carry the Tay-Sachs disease gene. So if you have that gene as part of your DNA, you're likely to get this disease, as are 1 in 300 people. And of course, it's inheritable and blah, blah, blah. Now, the question is, would you like to know if you have the gene that leads to that disease? Or would you not? Because that's a startup that I'm now advising that's just getting started, who just got their first round of fundraising, by the way. Congrats to the team at Arcus.ai. So,
Tyler, the ladies from the Stockholm meetup.
yes, that's right. You were at the event where they
Wow,
were on
that's
stage.
super awesome.
No, right?
I've got it. I have to send a congratulations. That's amazing.
Exactly. So Amay was in the audience when they were on stage at my event, and where they pitched this for the first time. And since then, which was just 3 months ago, they've now got their first fundraising, and they've created this AI way to monitor your DNA. And you take a DNA test, they keep it in the database. They keep track of studies like this that are constantly finding genes that are related to abnormalities that you might want to be notified about. That, hey, we just found out there's another new disease that's linked to a gene that you happen to have. Would you like to know about it so that you could take the recommended precautions to
Hey
minimize?
Tyler, I'm as an Ashkenazi Jew, I'm very
Yeah,
familiar with Tay-Sachs because it's very prevalent
yeah,
in the Ashkenazi Jewish, community. And but there's been genetic testing out for years. So Ashkenazi Jews generally get this genetic testing, and it's been
yeah,
available for God, I think maybe most of my life,
yeah,
actually. I think, and so because they don't want to have kids if they're both carriers because
correct.
it's but what? So what's so new about whatever you're doing? Because the genetic testing's been out there forever.
Yes. The difference is every week there's a new gene that's found to be related to some disease or cancer or strokes or heart disease or tons of things all the time are being found. Oh, we found that this gene is responsible for this thing that you don't want. They're being found all the time. These new links between genes and what do we call them? Diseases. And the question is, when you get your DNA test, they can test to see if you have the gene that's related to Tay-Sachs disease, as you said, as nearly every Ashkenazi Jew does, and because they don't want to marry each other if one of them has that, and now they're not able. They don't want to risk having kids. They want to find mates who.
I think both of them have to have it, right? Because you need to,
Right.
it's a recessive. Yeah, both. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
and that I think is a very misunderstood point about genetic engineering. So as we find the genes that could be re-engineered to reverse a disease, when you get the two copies, you have to ask the question first: why do 1 in 300 people have this gene, this allele? And what is the selective advantage of being heterozygous, one copy? Because you wouldn't see something persist for millions of years at a frequency of 1 in 300 if it was purely bad. It would be selected out. So this is like sickle cell disease. Having one copy of the gene gives you significant immunity to malaria. Having two copies causes a terrible disease known as sickle cell disease. And so there are many examples of this. And before we go wild with eliminating the heterozygous state of diseases when manifest as the homozygous state, two copies, we darn well better understand why that heterozygous state persists in a population, because there clearly is some selective advantage to that state. And then the question becomes, when you look at having children, do you do in vitro fertilization so you can test each of 10 embryos and find out which one is not homozygous and proceed?
Right. But to answer Ken's question is, do you want to be updated very regularly each week about the new revelations about genes that you have that are now revealed to be linked to diseases, that you can take measures, or sometimes can't, but often there are prescribable treatments to minimize the damage of, you now have the gene that is likely going to relate, to you having erectile dysfunction or colon cancer or whatever it is. And while that gene hasn't expressed itself yet, Now you might want to get a gym membership because that seems to be the best thing you can do is start running, 2 kilometers every day to prevent that from happening. So that's the idea, is that you would continually get updated about the genes that you have that match abnormalities that you don't want to see happen.
By the way, Tyler, John just dropped the gem mic. I thought it was one of the most brilliant observations I've heard in Clubhouse in a long time. I mean, that was an incredibly brilliant observation about somebody should think about maybe there's a benefit to having one side of it as opposed to both, on both sides, that it hasn't like the fact that it hasn't kind of like flushed out in all these years. I mean, I think that's a really brilliant observation.
Okay. So the next tweet that I have is from Joe Williams, who joins us regularly, that Web3 will fail because you can't solve politics with technology. What a great headline. Part of Web3's problem is that it's being promoted by many of the most obnoxious narcissists in the world. Wow. What a great opening sentence. But the Web3 dream is also familiar. What does it say? But the Web3 dream is also familiar techno-utopianism for anyone who lived through Web 1.0. Yeah, we did dream. We were overly ambitious. Yes, we were, as I said an hour ago. And yet here we are living the world that we were so ambitious about. So, yeah, again, we're being overly ambitious about everything that Web3 is offering, just like we did in Web 1. This guy's exactly right. However, 20 years later, here we are. So let's see how I it. mean, but you should shoot for the stars. I mean, that's the only way, innovation happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it doesn't mean that it won't happen. Just, be Just ambitious. won't happen overnight, yeah, as geeks would love it to do. Exactly. It won't happen overnight. They need to curb their expectations. Okay, that's just the nature of it. It's kind of always been that way. So anyway, the next one that I have is from Katerina. Oh no, that's the gene one that we just covered. But the gut bacteria linked to cognitive function. So this is a great example of yet another link in another study. A new study has found an association between the composition of microorganisms that inhibit the gut and cognitive health. As one of the first studies to use data from a large sample of community-dwelling participants, it contributes to a growing body of research into the link between the gut microbiome and the brain. And the conclusion is that there is an association between microorganisms that inhabit the gut and cognitive health. Now, there's potentially a genetic component to that. And if they can narrow in on that, would you like to know if you have the gene related to the microorganisms in your gut that lead to cognitive health? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If you do, there's now going to be a service that will keep you updated about all these studies that find all of these interesting links between your genes and all this other stuff, and keep you updated about the best course of action to remedy or take advantage of that new information.
Yeah,
So,
and this speaks to the distinction between precision medicine and personalized medicine.
exactly right.
And the difference is that if you learn a lot about the gut brain connection, but you don't learn about the gut genome um, immunome brain connection, you're gonna recommend things that are not relevant to individuals regularly. So that's sort of the big aha of big data analytics in the multi-omic space, is the hipome is connected to the thiome.
Oh no, where's my joke drum sound? Um, the pun sound. So the next one's from BB from Nikkei Japan, that South Korea will allow delivery robots on public roads next year. Delivery app Wowa and 7-Eleven start offering services on trial basis of these cute little delivery robots, which again, yet another clone of the Starship six-wheeled little robot from Estonia that Amazon and Yandex and others have copied. And now 7-Eleven, I just retweeted BB to the Tech News Twitter account so that you can see this cute little Korean robot leaving a 7-Eleven, or actually arriving at somebody who's pulling out their order from a 7-Eleven from this little road micro delivery robot. which is now going to be legal in Korea. The next is also from Bibi, from BBC. Bibi, you did it again.
Thank you.
Telegram Telegram is where women's nudes are shared without consent. A BBC investigation has found that women's intimate photos are being shared in large groups on Telegram. Yes, well, that's because that's the most convenient place to do it. It has nothing to do with. Again, this is journalism gone wrong right here.
But still, so the Telegram is encrypted in
Right,
their own.
right. Here comes the battle of over encryption. The BBC investigation found that women's intimate pictures are being shared to harass, shame, and blackmail them on a massive scale on the social media app Telegram. Warning, this article contains content of a sexual nature. In a split second, Sarah found out that a nude photo of her had been leaked and shared on Telegram. Her life changed. Her Instagram and Facebook profiles had been added and her phone number included. Suddenly, she was being contacted by unknown men asking for more photos. Quote, they made me feel like I was a prostitute because they believed I'd shared intimate photos of myself. It meant I had no value as a woman, she said. Sarah, not her real name, had shared the photo with one person, but it had ended up in a Telegram group of 18,000 followers, many from her neighborhood in Havana, Cuba. She now fears strangers in the street may have seen her naked. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to have any contact with my friends. The truth is that I suffered a lot. She's not alone. After months of investigating Telegram, we found large groups and channels sharing thousands of secretly filmed, stolen, or leaked images of women in at least 20 countries, and there's little evidence the platform is tackling this problem. Thousands of miles from Cuba, Nagar is having to adjust to a new life. She's from Azerbaijan, but says she has been forced to leave her homeland in 2021. A video of her having sex with her husband was sent to her family and then posted in a Telegram group. Quote, my mom started crying and told me there's a video. It was sent to me. She says, I was devastated, absolutely devastated. The video was shared in a group of 40,000 members. In the footage, Nagar's now ex-husband's face is blurred, but hers is clearly visible. She believes her ex secretly filmed her to blackmail her, a prominent critic of Azerbaijan's president. She says her mother was told the video would be released on Telegram unless her brother stopped his activism. Quote, they look at you as if you're a disgrace. Who cares if you're married, she says. And she says she confronted her ex-husband about the video. He denied making it. We tried to get a comment from him, but he didn't reply. Nagar is still struggling to move on with her life. I can't recover. I see therapists twice a week. They said there is no progress so far. They ask if I can forget it, and I say no. The pictures of Nagar and Sarah were both reported to Telegram, but the platform did not respond. Their experience is far from unique. The BBC has been monitoring 18 Telegram channels and 24 groups in countries ranging from Russia to Brazil and Kenya to Malaysia. The total number of subscribers is between 2 million. Personal details like home address and parents' phone numbers were posted alongside illicit photos. We saw group administrators asking members to send intimate images of ex-partners, colleagues, or fellow students to an automated account so they could be published without revealing the identity of the sender. Telegram now says it has more than 500 million active users worldwide. That's more than Twitter. That's double Twitter. With many attracted by its emphasis on privacy. Millions moved to Telegram in January 2021 from WhatsApp, which changed its privacy terms. And Telegram has long been popular with pro-democracy protesters in countries with media censorship. Users can post without sharing their name or phone number and create public or private groups with up to 200,000 members, or channels which can broadcast to an unlimited number of people. Despite Telegram's reputation for privacy, only the secret chat option provides end-to-end encryption, which ensures just the two people talking can see the message. It's the default setting on secure chat apps like Signal and WhatsApp. The platform also attracts users seeking a less regulated space, including those who have been banned from other platforms. You get the idea. So the question is this platform to blame for how bad actors are using it?
it's really like the question is how to do, because previously we just discussed the human regulation or human examination for those harmful content. So for a platform like Telegram, how to do this kind of things is the question.
I think, Tyler, for this article, the lady is just played out by the ex-husband. That's all.
The lady what?
No, she's played out by the ex-husband. I think the ex-husband is the one who shared the video, right? To that, well, probably sell it to someone, I guess.
So what is the
So
point?
I don't think it's Telegram's fault. Of course, Telegram have to do more. I guess you talk about moderation, but for this article that you just read, I think the lady got into trouble because of the ex-boyfriend. I mean, ex-husband.
Right. So are you saying that he couldn't have done that without Instagram? Without
Because initially, when you read the headline, I thought there is a breach on the Telegram security, which is not the case, right? It is because the data was leaked by the ex-husband. It's still human. I mean, human error, not human error, but
human
the
instigated?
ex-husband is the one who shared the video with
Oh,
with
and then
someone who shared to the big group, right? It's not the breach in the security of Telegram, right?
right. So if there was no Telegram, could he have done that bad thing? Which, by the way,
I'm sure there are many options too,
Cheryl,
right?
I didn't finish the question. That same bad thing that he did is precisely the same technology that enables journalists to share or whistleblowers to whistleblow anonymously. They're precisely the same technology. So, do you want a platform where whistleblowers can whistleblow anonymously, which will also allow bad actors to share bad content anonymously?
I
I thought
mean,
that
I
is
believe
also,
they could. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I mean, there's also an underground thing called dark web. Is that called dark net or dark web?
The dark web, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of avenues for people to do bad things if they want to.
I'm sure this is Ellen. I'm sure Telegram can figure out a way to maybe vet out those photos. If somebody is posting a photo, maybe do like a brief before it's broadcasted. They can look at it beforehand, just like you know, like anything else. I think on Discord, before you can add somebody to your group, they have to, there's like a 10-minute period before it's posted, especially if there's any type of nudity in it. Maybe, there could be a brief, because I mean, there are algorithms and setups where you can check for nudity or, certain type of actions that are happening in a video. So probably before it's posted, it takes 10 minutes for it to post. That can also curb some of this stuff from happening, and it'll give somebody, a team, time to assess if the poster is posting something valid, especially if there's no context with the picture. Because most whistleblowers, they might upload a video, but there will still be some context when they upload it.
Yeah, hey Tyler, I would go the other direction. I think it's a platform. It's not Telegram's fault. The husband took the
True.
video and sent it to her parents and sent it to the neighborhood. I mean, it's not like it was some random thing. I mean, the way it was found out wasn't because of some scanning site where they, reverse imaged her face and it's out there. Her husband nefariously did this allegedly. He took the video, he released it. I mean, if you want to do that, you're going to have to do this for every single platform out there. People won't be able to communicate. And I would put this more as this is a limited situation where he shared this on this platform. Again, he could have done it on OnlyFans, he could have done it on Messenger, he could have done it anywhere.
Right.
It's not, and it was, as Cheryl pointed out, it wasn't a security breach, and it's not, there's OnlyFans where this is the prevalent activity, which might be different. Maybe they'd have some duty to moderate, which OnlyFans doesn't want, but this isn't some public site. Again, it was a direct communication. So, again, hype for the journalists, in my view.
And you also mentioned that the lady is the one who sent the video to the ex-husband, right?
No, the article didn't.
No, that was somebody else earlier with a picture of themselves. They sent that to a person. That's a different story.
Yeah. So lesson learned is don't send any nudity over such platform.
Nobody did. The article doesn't say that. So the next one's from KC, that JP Morgan Bank becomes the world's first bank to arrive on the metaverse. The largest bank in the US said it had become the first lender to arrive in the metaverse, a virtual world based on blockchain technology. And the question is, what the hell are they going to do in the metaverse? Yes, you can apply for a loan in the metaverse. You could get a loan for some virtual land. Yes. Now that would be hot. Now that would be a headline. That would
No, they
be
are, Tyler. Tyler, they already are. They're taking out mortgages for virtual land. I think it was in a title yesterday or the day before.
that should be the title right there. The next one from BB from Reuters: digital Chinese currency makes muted games debut. Only 3 forms of payment are available at Olympic venues. China's yuan currency is digital version, the e-yuan, and Visa. Alipay and WeChat Pay are not accepted inside the closed loop. China's aim to make an Olympic splash with its digital currency thwarted by a COVID-19 induced decision to exclude foreign payment systems. So digital Chinese currency makes muted games debut. Yeah, they were hoping for a bit more attention. And then also from BB from South China Morning Post: India's tax officials search Huawei's offices in India. The search comes days after New Delhi, meaning India, banned a host of Chinese apps over national security concerns. Oh, wow. So the Indian government is now searching Huawei's offices in New Delhi. Local media reports said the officials were looking at the financial documents, account books, and Huawei's Indian businesses, as well as overseas transactions. Indian tax officials on Wednesday conducted searches at the offices of Chinese tech giant Huawei days after India banned a host of Chinese apps over national security concerns. Tensions between New Delhi and Beijing have been running high since a deadly 2020 clash involving their militaries in disputed Himalayan border area. The latest volley from India saw officials from its income tax department search Huawei's India's premises on the outskirts of New Delhi in the southern tech hub of Bangalore. Quote, we have been informed of the visit of income tax team to our office and also of their meeting with some personnel, Huawei India said in a statement emailed to AFP. Huawei was confident their operations in India were firmly compliant to local laws and they would fully cooperate with the authorities, the statement added. Indian authorities were not immediately available for comment. Local media reports said officials were looking at the financial documents, accounting books, and Huawei's Indian businesses, as well as overseas transactions. Earlier this week, India's Home Ministry banned 54 mobile applications from China, including the popular game Garena Free Fire. India is the world's second biggest market by number of phone users, and the government has justified the bans on the apps, saying they threatened its sovereignty and integrity. In 2020, the government banned TikTok and a host of other popular short video apps from China. Anti-China sentiment has grown in India since the Himalayan border clash, sparking calls for a boycott of goods from the neighboring country. However, China continues to be a key economic partner for India, with bilateral trade in 2021 crossing the $125 billion, according to media reports. Okay, next up is Uber will now let you see your ratings. We got that one. Zuckerberg wants his employees to be MetaMates. That was the biggest story of today. And Disney names executive to oversee the metaverse. We covered that. And
Tyler,
Tyler,
could
could
I
I
circle
circle
back
back
to
to
one
one
of
of the ones we did earlier on?
I'm trying, there was a really great one, a very important one that I'm trying to remember that I saw that I thought for sure somebody would tweet and I thought for sure would be in the top 10, but it wasn't. And it was about the outcome of a lawsuit and a company is being held responsible for something that just seemed totally unbelievable.
Is it the gun manufacturer? It was covered
Yes,
yesterday. It
yes.
was covered yesterday, yeah.
Sandy,
It's
yeah.
Sandy
Nicholas
Hook,
article.
Remington. Yes, exactly. So
Yes.
the parents of the school shooting are holding the gun maker responsible, and the gun maker has settled for ostensibly, if I didn't really read the article, I just skimmed it.
72 million.
$72 million the gun maker is paying in a settlement because the shooter used their brand of gun. That's an interesting new approach to holding people responsible.
Yeah, but why hold the manufacturer responsible for how they use their product?
I would love to
Because
hear the case. I'm obviously uninformed. I'm totally uninformed about the argument.
Tyler,
What was the argument that they?
this is the Sandy Hook parents.
Yes, I get that.
Yeah, okay.
Are the Japanese going to sue the makers of the atomic bomb? I mean, how does this work?
I mean, most people took the stance, or at least I took the stance, I'll just speak for me, is that you cannot blame the tool. You have to blame the individual that use it. That's where all of it lies. If anything, this is a question about mental health and also about, parents being a bit more responsible with weapons at home sometimes too, having those discussions and being a bit more active. And I think, yeah, that's what we had talked about yesterday.
Okay.
Not necessarily blaming the parent, but there's some school shootings where parents were just very
According to what was the argument? What's the argument of the people who say that the gun company should be responsible financially?
So Tyler,
What
having
was their
having
argument?
worked in this stuff a while ago, it's going to be something to do where they breached some other. Either someone just texted me that they breached a Connecticut state law.
Okay,
I don't know how they did that in the sale of it because usually that would have gone through
got it.
the
That makes sense.
distributor. But however, that's one. But also, it can be that a lot of these guns are designed or easily converted for uses that is not what they claim they're selling it for. This came up back in the 101 California shootings, 15, 20 years ago, that the guns could, you don't need like automatic, what were they? They're not very efficient automatic guns, but they could be easily converted. And the manufacturers knew that. So it was that liability versus just that it's a straight gun being used. So there's something to do with the manufacturing of it, or they sold it in violation of law.
Great
There,
answer.
there was a Connecticut marketing
It
law
wasn't
supposedly.
it that the advertising was correlated to being quite explicitly advertising to youth, and I think that's part of the argument. I could be wrong, but
Okay, Ken, you were saying? Ken.
I was saying that there was a Connecticut marketing law supposedly they violated, and I don't know the specifics of it. I mean, because to me, and it's not a pro gun or anti gun position, but I mean, to me, false marketing would be, if the gun blew up in your hands or something, or it didn't actually work. I mean, the problem is they sold the gun and the gun worked. So I don't really understand it, but it was
No, I
a
think someone just texted me. They sold it and there were some marketing laws that they
yes, I
violated.
said it was a
And so,
Connecticut
however
marketing
it is,
law.
so
it's
Yeah.
that's what
because they
they're saying. It's
marketed it
not.
to teens. The way they were
Yeah, but it's a
marketing it and
violation of
showing it
marketing.
in like Call of Duty, and the way they present arms to macho mentality of
That
teenagers.
wasn't the issue.
That's the ploy that the Sandy
But
Hook
that was not the
parents went
but
for.
that was not the legal issue. The gun was bought not by the kid. The gun was bought by his
No, no, no,
mother.
no, no. It's how they marketed it and influencing a generation of populations. That's the angle that they went after the Remingtons. Kind of like how Al
That's
Capone didn't
actually
get busted for gang stuff. They got caught for tax evasion. Completely different, you know? It's not so.
what Tom is saying. What Tom is saying is right, Tyler. I just did a little bit of quick research, and it appears that the Independent noted down that Remington becomes the first gun maker held liable for mass shootings after a $73 million settlement with Sandy Hook family. As the lawsuit claimed Remington directed its marketing of the AR rifles towards young men. And there is where that is a marketing issue
Okay.
because they are
Exactly.
being held liable for the way they targeted their marketing, which is really they're getting them in the pocket and having a background in marketing. That's exactly where Remington is being held liable. And I agree with Ken, it's not a pro or anti-gun. It's just what they did and how they were marketing the AR-17 rifles that they were selling. And that's where I believe in the state that Jennifer was saying, in the state in which they were in, there was clearly a law against that. And it seems
Yeah,
like
yeah, but
that's where they got
the
nailed.
difference, in this case, in my view,
Yeah.
unlike cigarettes, where arguably the tobacco companies would market it to people who weren't even legally supposed to get them, and people can use phony IDs and they can buy cigarettes at earlier ages. There's no evidence that people underage are buying legal guns at anywhere.
Ken,
Okay,
that's interesting you'd say that because what the families receive the rights to as well, which I think it's something that people are also not really paying attention to. The settlement agreement also allows the families to make public thousands of pages of quote unquote internal company documents that prove Remington's wrongdoing. attorneys for the plaintiffs said in a press release. So Ken, I totally see where you're coming from. The debate or the challenge that I'm saying here from a marketing perspective is they did some things very, like, probably not against marketing principles that basically put them liable as a company manufacturing guns. And as a result of that, they are now paying for it. And
Amy, I'm going to jump in. Wait, just to clarify
yeah, go
there,
ahead.
it's not that they're being held. They're being held for violation of
Yeah, correct.
marketing laws,
Yep.
not for in the marketing laws or the sale of guns. I don't know if the law is the sale of
No,
guns to minors, but it's the marketing of guns to minors.
yeah, correct.
It's that law. It's not. So
Yes.
it's not that. Right.
In
So it's not
That's
games.
why
that.
the
It
internal
says in this
documents are
article I
coming
just sent
out,
to
right?
Tyler, it says in video games.
Yeah, it's internal company documents that prove Remington's wrongdoing. So clearly, they're releasing thousands of public documents. Those families, it's going to be allowed to be released. So those documents and pages, it says here that will allow the families to make public thousands of pages of internal company documents that prove Remington's wrongdoing. And when Jennifer is stating that, that's absolutely, I agree with you. And I'm also agreeing with the gentleman that was started to talk about how they're advertised, because those are very delicate lines, because states have different jurisdictions where they're able to market certain ways and advertise their products. And I think, Tyler, this could be remnants of like advertising sugar or candy or Coca-Cola or cigarettes to kids. Do you remember those ads, like the Marlboro Man? Like before it was made that, God, I just aged myself. What the fuck? Sorry. Basically, the Marlboro Man, if you imagine that it was like really flashy and sexy to sell cigarettes, right? And they were teenagers with James Dean and blah, blah, blah. But then once they slapped that attorneys general that smoking cigarettes was dangerous, they actually, all those ad men from like the Mad Men days, they couldn't advertise this free willy-nilly as they used to. And I think what's happened here is that they found in this case not a small piece, but a piece of wrongdoing that's in the context of their marketing and advertising strategy inside the company. And that is what they're being held up to.
Yeah. So let me just clarify. So it's the legal issue is that they probably weren't allowed to market this to kids, right? So, and the reason the cigarettes, to tie that back, is that you're allowed to advertise cigarettes even though they're terrible for you, blah blah blah. But what they weren't allowed to do was use ads that directly targeted kids, right? So you can make it, and then the standard is going to be, how do we show that that happened? That's what they did. They violated that law. So they didn't violate. It's not just they're a gun manufacturer and their gun was used in the Sandy Hook shooting. It looks like what the law that they breached is that they marketed to kids guns to kids, which they're not allowed to do, or to young, whatever. And whether the ads were in video games or anywhere else, I mean, that's another part of this whole advertising, is that people don't even realize they're looking at ads a lot of the time and being influenced. So, but it's an advertising breach that then resulted in that big fine. It's not that they are, the gun manufacturer of the shooting is being held liable just for having sold the gun.
Well, it was a settlement, and there's something else that was really important about this that is getting overlooked by the media. Remington's already bankrupt. They're not bankrupt because of this case. They were bankrupt for other financial reasons. So they're sitting in bankruptcy, and they want to get out. And you have creditors there, and having been on creditors committees and having bought distressed debt, I was in that market. We don't really care about long-term implications of something like a CEO of a company might. We basically bought something at 20 cents on the dollar, and if we can get 60 cents on the dollar, then we try to figure out how to do that and settle the case. So once the creditors have an influence on the disposition of the bankruptcy case, they're much more likely to push for a settlement where an operating company that is not in bankruptcy might like have held out and said, we're going to fight this all the way. So the fact that they're already in bankruptcy, I think, is really influential in the fact that they settled, probably for a number that they could have been held for a much larger number, because it's obviously a very sympathetic situation. So I
Yeah,
would
but
not
hey, Ken,
get concerned.
excellent point on the change in stakeholders there. That's an excellent point because, as you point out, it's a different view as to what the incentive is there, and the creditors are trying to reduce exposure more than long term operations. But this is going to hold as precedent going forward, regardless. And so that's excellent input there.
Tyler, I just Googled and searched out the marketing restrictions to advertise to minors in state of Connecticut. So if you look at the the law gov for Connecticut, it says there's a minimum age restriction, and this is really interesting because it says the federal law regulates the sale of ammunition to young people. It bars licensed manufacturers or dealers from selling long gun ammunition to anyone who they believe is under 18. Also, they may not sell handgun ammunition to anyone that's reasonably believes is under
But
age
Amy, it's not
21.
sale. It's not
But
sale. It wasn't. Then
just
it would be the person who sold
but
the
they
gun.
are a
It's the marketing.
manufacturer. As a manufacturer, they sell items, regardless of what that item is. They are
No, the person that took the cash is the one that sold it. So
no,
it's a
actually,
shop.
I've come from
Remington didn't sell it.
manufacturing. The person who creates the product is responsible for the product that's created. It's not the reseller who's the store that sells
If
the
it's
gun.
product liability, Amy, no, it is product liability that it would
Okay,
go
so I
after
don't
you, but
know my
not for
marketing
sale.
and
You're
okay, all
reading.
right, okay,
You're
Jennifer.
reading a sale law. You're reading a sale
I'm
law.
not
So the
reading a
name
sale law.
whoever
I'm looking
sold
at
it,
something
you are.
but it's still related to the topic. At the end of the day, it's still related to the topic. The bottom line
No,
is
because
that
it would be a different
companies are
case. It would be a
related
different,
to,
yeah,
and how did the
different case.
families win this? They won this because the lawyers have to find different
No, they
indications
didn't
that will allow
win.
them
They
to do
just
it.
settled because they want to take it off the record.
Yeah, it's a
And
settlement,
I
not.
made it,
and
and the
having,
shooter was 20 years old, by the way. The shooter was 20 years
it
old, and it
says under
wasn't even his
21.
gun; it was his
But
mother's.
what
So,
Amy just read is a sales law, so that would have gone to the store, the actual gun shop, who probably has 50 models that
and
sold
again,
it.
the
That's
shooter
not
was
what was
20
regulated.
years
It's the
old.
marketing is what they violated. It's a marketing law, and yes, then it goes up to Remington marketing it. And what Emma is talking about in the chain is if there's a product liability claim, it would go all the way up the chain, and each person
Well,
in that
having
chain
worked
would
in
go.
production management, Jennifer, that's exactly what I'm trying to describe is that the process is that when the product's manufactured, irregardless what the product is, it will always roll back to the
No,
manufacturer
because
of
the
the product.
violation is
You're
marketing.
telling me
No, for
no to the
product
work that I've
liability
been doing
built
for
to
20
sale.
years?
I'm telling you, I'm an attorney that does this stuff. Yes, I am actually
Okay, so
telling you.
you've worked with
Because
manufacturing
liability,
companies and the
yes,
company doesn't get stuck.
absolutely. Product
Really, I
liability.
would
No,
like to
for
know
product
which one of those
liability, but that's
countries don't
not the
have
claim
product
here.
liability.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about sale and marketing. We're talking about marketing. Honestly, we're not even talking about sale here. They weren't held liable for sale. They were held liable for marketing, which is not product liability. So you need to distinguish these things, okay? And
And
that's
if you understand the
hands
B2B
down.
processes or end-to-end processes in a company, they're interoperable. Sales and marketing and finance are units inside a company. And what they have access to, these families, is those internal documents that are clearly
It's a
aligning.
marketing claim. No, Mark, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not a
Well,
product
clearly you don't
liability claim
understand
that
the
goes up
marketing
the
strategy in a
chain.
company because you're a lawyer.
I think I understand the laws applicable to marketing, Amy, and that's
Not
what the
if you
case
don't
is
work
here.
in
We're talking
marketing. You
about,
wouldn't understand the depth of the
I
internal
do,
marketing documents because you don't work in
I
it
do.
every
I have to
day.
review them all the time,
So
Amy. That's
that
what I
makes you an
do.
expert in marketing is what you're saying, but not law. Or
Marketing
so you're not an
claims
expert in both.
in
Okay, I
legal.
got it.
No, I'm an expert in how the law applies to marketing claims. Thanks, Amy. Yes, I am.
Okay. So, the that was the last article that I had. That was the one that I thought people would bring up today, although it's not tech related, so that's probably why it wasn't.
There
Yes,
was one
another
on
one
yesterday.
I just wanted to bring back to the table,
Yeah,
if I may.
sure. Hey,
This
Pat.
is Pat.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is Pat in Twitter Space today. I just wanted to take us back to that article that was introduced while you were out of the room for a few minutes, the one about bionic eyes now obsolete and unsupported. It sort of is linked to the last discussion we're having in the sense that, things that are produced and are marketed and are sold, or even at a research level or initial market reach level, and then the company goes broke or is obsolete or decided it's bought out by somebody else, and then the product might be made obsolete or whatever it is. What happens to the person who is using it? So, we've all had that experience with technical objects like computers or whatever, programs going obsolete or going defunct or whatever. But if it's to do with health, what implications, ethical, social, moral, whatever, would the participant in that program, the user of that technology, what would the responsibility be to them when something goes obsolete or a company is bought out and that product is sold down the line or whatever? These people who have had their eyes magically, in a sense, replaced and they can now see, they are now left without support and potentially with dangers if they have to have those things removed from their eyes and replace. What's going to replace, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to see if anybody has any further comments on that. We did talk about it a little bit, but I felt that maybe some more discussion might be quite useful. Thank you.
Well, the FDA I think it's 7 years that a company is responsible for a product while it's still in its life cycle, and then after that, it's basically up to the people who are still applying those off the shelf items that are being used. It's on them, especially because most companies are, especially in the medical device world, they report when an object goes obsolete, and repairs and remanufacturing of those products last until the parts remain available to the manufacturer. So there's really nothing that a person can do who's had an eye, like you're talking about, put in, other than a hope that the longevity of that company remains in place so that they can still get supported, or the person who put in that product moves on to a newer technology, which is typically what happens.
Okay.
So is there a case now sorry, is there a place then for how it is presented to the potential user of that product in how it is explained to them, and they are clearly made to understand that this is a finite piece of technology?
Can I comment on this?
Sure, Shane. Go ahead.
There are services that guarantee things for a very long time. Certainly, for example, data storage is in that category. But the one that comes to my mind in this category is cord blood. Cord blood that is extracted during birth can be sent to companies that freeze it for you. And their service level agreement with you is not bounded by any dates. Now, things can go wrong. There's no 100% guarantee, but it is set up to hold it pretty much forever as long as you kind of pay your subscription fee. So for things like this, it really needs to follow that kind of a model. And the manufacturers and the providers need to guarantee that up front. And if you have to risk buy, so to say, quote, risk buy additional components to guarantee availability into the future, well, then so be it. That's the way it should be managed. Thank you.
Okay. The next tweet that I have from BB is an update from Reuters that the EU is trying to push for the single mobile charging port, which of course would be USB-C, which of course would be very upsetting to Apple, who's very adamant about using the Lightning port. So essentially, the EU phrases it like, we're not trying to force Apple to do anything. We're just trying to have everybody use a universal mobile charging port, which basically means everyone else is pretty much already using USB-C at this point, so it's pretty much forcing Apple to abandon Lightning. And they say that they expect this to happen by the end of the year. There you go. Let's see if that happens.
Isn't Apple also like leading the charge on USB-C? I don't know if that's fully accurate.
On their laptops, yes, but they're adamant.
Also on their phones, they've got phones that are USB-C, or they did.
Nope.
No, right now still Lightning.
Like everything that has been Lightning, they've at least attempted. Like for example, the iPads. Like there are devices that have been in the past Lightning that have moved over to USB-C. I think there's no reason to believe that that's not where they're headed. I'm interested to hear where that information that they're still attached to Lightning is coming from.
Because their digital rights management is tied to Lightning, which they're not yet able to do on USB-C. So the next,
What's the DRM for?
so they can control. They're able to have more control, essentially, and the way they have, it enables them to do things that they claim they're not able to do on USB-C. With many things that they claim would even lesser user privacy, but it's really about data control that they have a unique ability to do due to the Lightning port that they would not like to give up. And they've said, if you force us to do this, it would actually hurt consumers, is what they're saying. But what they really mean is they would have less control So they're going to have that debate, and they're going to have that debate in the open. There was one hacker
Yeah, I
who
just don't
made.
think that's true anymore, honestly. I mean, there's if you even just do a quick Google search, they are pushing for iPhones like the 2022 iPhones, the 14 will likely have USB-C. I don't think that they're quite as resistant as they're being painted to be here.
They could have done USB-C 7 years ago if they wanted to.
Sure. I mean, I guess, yeah. I don't see how there's any IP protection or monopoly protection or anything like that. I mean, they're not in the cable business. I don't think it's that strong of a case.
I would suggest I'll DM you a link about why Apple insists on using Lightning. They will continue. They don't want to go to USB-C, but if the EU forces them to, they're not going to have a choice. So they might start announcing now that we plan to do next year's models, but that's probably because they know more than this journalist does in this headline, that the EU plans to pass this. And I would wager very heavily that the EU will pass this, and it will leave Apple in a very unfavorable position where they're going to. It's better that they get out in front of it if they know that that's going to pass. They can do some internal kind of investigation to see if the necessary votes are there to pass it, and get out in front of it and take a position that it was their own move rather than try and appear to be, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that. I would tend to buy into that narrative if it seemed like there was a decent reason for them to. I just feel like if you look at the economics of what they're attempting to do as just a company, just like take a step back. The only thing really that the cable achieves is it either digs you further into their ecosystem or you drift away from it. Like that's really all that it comes down to. And then to that end, it's been in their best interest, as they have been doing, to move toward USB-C, because the last thing you want is A, to have lost your cable and not be able to use your device, or B, to have to fish out which cable belongs to which device because you want to switch from one to the other, which is something Mac is really big on, right? The responsiveness of quickly going from iPad to iMac, or even using your iPad or iPhone as a second display, like those sorts of things. Sending a message on your iPhone and replying to it on your phone, or your laptop, or whatever it is, right? So to me, it's really always been that, and if anything, the form factor uh, is more an issue than anything else. They didn't switch to USB-C really for much of a reason, except for the fact that I don't know if you've looked at a MacBook Air from the side before or not, but you really truly can't go any bigger than that. And the Lightning, of course, you could go about 2 millimeters or so thinner. But the power capabilities are limited there as well, right? And it's not universal. So I just think it has more to do with ease of use, and there are certainly ways that they lynch their customers, right? We know this. Like every other company, they're certainly fucking us in one capacity or another. I just don't think it's this one. You know, maybe it was, at one point. But again, I just think I would push back on just the fact that it's their current agenda to hold on to Lightning if they know it's dying. That doesn't sound like the Apple that I grew up on.
But they do.
Quick comment on that.
It's not that it's dying; it's that it gives them a technical advantage. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think they're more of, what I'm observing is that they're moving more and more towards air gapped, sealed, wireless everything. That if they had their druthers, they would be no plug,
Right.
nothing would
Oh,
get
of
plugged
course,
in.
of course.
Yeah.
But you can't do that
So I
with
think that's
power.
what they're pushing. Well, you are doing that with power, and now not quite at the laptop level. But
Yeah, well,
anyway, I
not
think
not on
that if
any
there
level. I
is,
don't know if you've ever used a key charger, but they suck.
I use the charger on my phone all the time, but I'm just not saying that it works or not. I'm saying that if there is an agenda, that would be the agenda.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Next one that I have here is from BB. That from Reuters reporting that COVID vaccination during pregnancy helps protect babies after birth, according to a U.S. study. Vaccinating pregnant women against the coronavirus may help pregnant COVID-19 hospitalizations in infants after they're born. Okay. Then
Is
the next.
that is that a is that just another way of saying it passes through the membranes and we can't control it? Are they making it?
Yeah,
Is
that
it?
sounds like a
It's
positive
a
spin on the fact that
feature
we
out of a
can't.
bug.
Yeah, we can't stop this thing. So I hope it's a good thing.
Okay. Next is from Thomas Tong. Researchers use solar cells to achieve fast underwater wireless communication. Although solar cells are typically designed to turn light into power, researchers have shown they can also be used to achieve underwater wireless optical data transmission. Okay, cool one. And the next is from Katerina that Elon Musk donated $5.7 billion to charity. The gift is the largest philanthropic donation in history, which is probably related to his taxes, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly. That's another
Yes.
feature bug thing.
That's one thing that I wanted to mention here. This is how the like the super rich can influence the tax process by saying to the IRS, I want to decide where my money goes, not you. And by doing that, they're screwing up the whole system because the government knows where the priorities are. He doesn't. In this way, he's basically writing off some of his income tax and deciding where the money goes and forcing the government's hand, messing up with the system. I don't know. This is one of the areas where if you are going to make that such a big donations to anybody, maybe you need to some sort like SEC filings. Maybe you should have an IRS filing with that and say, you know what, we do have priorities. We do have areas that need to be covered first before you go ahead and decide that this charity takes my money. And land my
Uh,
plane there.
I'd like to counter that by saying that because there are
Sure.
limits to that. I mean, it's not as if you can just say, "Oh, I'm going to give 100% of my tax burden to charity," right? So because they have limits, that's why I don't have a problem with that. So for us to be able to say that somebody can use up to 5 to 10% of their tax burden towards charity, while the other 90 to 95% will be determined by the government, I'm totally fine with, and I think we should have that freedom.
I agree. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but the thing is, when we're talking about a certain individual with a net worth or like taxes that go against his income of let's say I don't know 200K, it's completely a different ball game when we're talking about someone whose taxes are going to be in the billions. So if it's going to be that influential in how it is going to be managed, then I suggest, well, I believe that that the system has more insight into who needs this most. This specific charity that might not really be needing that 5 point whatever $1 billion, or maybe the super poor people in America who are like underprivileged in so many different ways, education, healthcare, and otherwise, and like the communities that are really struggling who deserve to be getting this money versus one specific charity that is focused on one specific area that might not even necessarily be that in that need on that desperate need of donations. So I'm just
By the way,
saying,
the tax laws don't work like they're being discussed. They don't really lower your tax burden, your tax bill per se. Basically, it's a deduction. Okay, so what someone like Elon Musk does, he says, I'll just pick a charity. Let's say he wanted to give something, to I don't even know where this went, by the way, this money. But let's say he wanted to give money to the March of Dimes or something, rather than having him sell his stock and having to pay capital gains taxes on it, he just donates the appreciated stock. But he doesn't have any use of the money, so he's not. It's not like, for example, he's like being able to keep some of the money and not pay taxes on it. It's basically it's just a an efficient way for him to donate it to a charity that he might have wanted to donate to anyway. And that's what it is. But it doesn't really lower taxes like people think it does. It's not, whatever taxes he owes, he's going to have to pay anyway. So this doesn't really lower his taxes. It's just a way of him getting rid of an asset in a tax efficient way. But he doesn't have any use of that asset because he just gave it away. Is that?
But Dave,
I hope that's clear.
Dave, I don't think this is a question of lowering the tax burden as much as it is controlling where it goes. And if you have individuals controlling where society needs to invest, that is kind of in conflict with why you have a government to make those same decisions. And some of it, I think, was asserted that is okay and acceptable and maybe even a good thing, but when you push it to higher levels, that can be disruptive. In fact, the Gates Foundation's influence in education has been highly controversial, exactly for that reason, because they could control and sway the entire industry in a particular direction away from what governments wanted to do locally. And in retrospect, some of those moves may not have been all that great. Thanks.
Okay. The next one, and I think the last one, is from Jeff G. A new test could determine the severity of your COVID symptoms. If you're worried you'll have severe COVID, a new test could help ease your worry. So you can find out in advance. Because, again, there's a genetic component oftentimes, and you could find out that you have the gene that could lead to long COVID or severe COVID and what have you. But I don't think this is a DNA test that they're referring to in this article. It says scientists have developed a new blood test that would help determine the severity. Scientists at George Washington University said they developed a new tool deemed as a simple blood test that can quickly detect if someone has COVID-19 and how to predict the severity. Their immune system will react to the infection. We're using the person's own body to tell us what they think something is awry, and the researchers published their findings of a blood test in study comes as coronavirus variants continue to change, for example, and you get the idea. Very cool. And I did find an article about the why Apple uses Lightning from a Slashdot article from about an article. The Lightning port isn't about convenience, it's about control, is the name of the headline of the name of the article. Notably absent from Apple's arguments is the fact that cutting out the Lightning port on the phone won't just create more e-waste if you buy Apple's logic or inconvenience. It's about customers. It also means that Apple will lose out on the revenue it makes from every Lightning cable and accessory that works with the iPhone, Apple made or not. That's the point. Along with the control it has over what kinds of hardware does or doesn't get to exist for the iPhone and which companies get to make those devices. Because Apple has its own unique cable, Apple can force gets to determine who gets to, if USB becomes the open standard, then anyone can make any device that now can connect to Apple's ecosystem. With Lightning, you have to get Apple's permission to make something that is compatible with a Lightning cable. You see the massive control advantage in that? I think it's fairly obvious.
I think eventually when they get probably some sort of regulation or legislation from the European Union, they'll act as if this was the plan all along, and it'll sound like the copy and paste. We're introducing copy and paste. People will be excited to hear that there's USB-C, and it will be ridiculous to the rest of us.
Apple's current program means that if you want to plug anything into an iPhone, be it a charger or an adapter or an accessory, you have to go through Apple. And Apple takes a cut of every one of those devices too. They summarize a commonly held theory here that Apple is sticking with its proprietary Lightning port on iPhones because they profit from all peripherals. Because they own the link between their device and your device. There you go. And then I think that leaves it for now. And thank you to everybody for all of the fantastic links and articles and comments that we do every day. And let's do it again tomorrow on a special Thursday edition. Yes, thank you, everybody. We'll see you.
If you're interested in tech news, you know, at the
top. That's right. We can go to Tech News Africa. See you all over there.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Shaheen.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks,
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.
Go to Massey's room.